Chapter 76. A drop of cold sweat slid down Xiaoxian's forehead. If he hadn't leaned back a little, would he have lost one of his eyes? It looked like a fluff, but it could pierce through the thick leaves. If the leaves were a little thinner, the fluff would have pierced through them. Even if Xiaoxian leaned back, he would still have been hit. No wonder Asuo and the others said it was more dangerous here, and that they could lose their lives if they weren't careful. Thinking back to when they were hunting the jumping fruit tree, if any of them had hesitated for a moment, they would not have been able to find a place to hide and would have been pierced into a white-haired hedgehog. There was no suitable shelter in the area where the jumping fruit tree grew. Xiaoxian smelled blood. Some of the warriors were injured, but he didn't hear any screams. Their breathing was still the same as before, but two of them were breathing more rapidly. After a while Ta said, "I'll look outside." "Okay." Asa opened the two closed leaves a crack and looked outside. "We can go out now." "Open it." Ta signaled the others to open the closed leaves. Crack, crack, crack. The sound was still like the sound of heavy wooden planks. With the help of the light, their vision became clearer. It wasn't just Xiaoxian who had a fluff piercing in. There were also fluff piercing in other places, but in some places it went deeper, and in others it was only the tip of the fluff sticking out. The blood that Xiaoxian smelled came from the hands of the two warriors. Since they had to pull the leaves together with their hands, they naturally had to touch the leaves. If they were lucky, they wouldn't be hurt by the fluff, but if they were unlucky, they would bleed. Out of the 5 warriors trying to pull the leaves together, only 2 were injured. This was already considered good. However, the fluff was poisonous and had a certain anticoagulant effect. Even if it was just a small wound, with the warrior's healing ability, it still couldn't stop the bleeding. The arms of the 2 warriors who were stabbed were already numb. The others hurriedly poured the clear green water in their flasks on their wounds. After a while, the wounds would stop bleeding. "How are the others?" Ta asked. 3 of us are injured. Who has water? Lend me some." Someone on another plant said. "We're doing fine. Only one of us is injured." Everyone was busy treating their wounds. Xiaoxian also contributed a portion of his gourd. Looking around, Xiaoxian couldn't help but take a deep breath. There were white fluffy hairs everywhere in this large area. Some places were denser while others were thinner. However, the range of these fluffy hairs was too wide. Some insects and birds that couldn't dodge in time were hit. White hairs could be seen everywhere on the trees, on the huge grass leaves, and on the roots of the vines. This kind of large-scale indiscriminate attack could only be described as a disaster. There weren't many large animals in the forest. Their huge bodies made them a huge target. In this place dominated by plants, large animals didn't have many advantages. Even ferocious beasts like the thorn-black wind might not be able to survive here. Therefore, except for some insects like giant dragonflies and rippers, as well as some birds and small animals, the animals that couldn't adapt to the environment all stayed away from this green area. After all, this type of attack was too powerful. The one Xiaoxian encountered was just one of the many large-scale attacks he had. On the ground, there was a meter-long bird with 2 white fluffy hairs stuck in its body. It flapped its wings weakly, but it still couldn't do anything. Its muscles were paralyzed, and its claws couldn't be controlled. Whoosh! A blood-red vine stretched out from behind the bushes, which were as tall as a man. It wrapped around the bird and dragged it into the bushes. No matter how hard the bird struggled, it couldn't do anything. In the end, the vine and the bird both disappeared into the bushes. Only the sound of flapping wings could be heard. There was a soft sound. Everything was quiet again. Since entering the forest, Xiaoxian hadn't seen any animal carcasses. Now it seemed that there were many cleaners in the forest, who dragged away the animals that had lost their ability to move, or were completely dead to become their nutrients. "Let's take a rest first. We'll go hunting later," Ta said to everyone. This white drizzle attack covered a large area, and at the same time it drove away many threats. At least for a short period of time, there wouldn't be any aggressive groups like rippers in this area. That was why Ta asked everyone to take a rest here. These white hairs are poisonous. Only a little bit on the tip is poisonous. Tua was treating the wound of a warrior whose hand was almost pierced through. He pulled out the white hairs that had pierced deeply into the flesh and showed it to Xiaoxian. "As long as you don't touch the poisonous parts, they're not that dangerous now." Tua said. Xiao Xian pinched the palm-long white hair that was a little thicker than a hair and looked at it carefully. It was very light, and the poisonous part was at the tip of the tip. There was a slightly hard, small sac in the shape of an arrow, which contained the poison. The white hairs looked very soft, and in fact they were very soft. However, they could pierce through thick objects like needles in an instant, which showed how fast these white hairs were when they were shot out. Before hiding in the leaves, Xiao Xian saw that the pom-poms that looked like dandelions were made of these white hairs. Feeling the toughness of the white hairs, Xiao Xian took out his knife and wanted to cut off the poison sac at the tip of the white hairs. However, he found that he couldn't cut off the white hairs with just a few simple cuts. He had to cut back and forth and finally cut off the poison sac at the tip of the white hairs. He didn't expect that such a thin hair would be so difficult to cut off. Ha 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 ha. I'm dying of laughter. This kid is so funny. Xian, you don't understand. Not everything can be played with. If you want to play with a rope, can I find you a grass vine? It's easy for a new warrior to think things too simply. You're still young. There are many things you don't understand. The other warriors who were resting on the side couldn't help but laugh. When they saw Xiao Xian cutting the white hairs seriously with a knife, they were just watching a show. Now they were teaching Xiao Xian in the tone of a senior. Xian, although these white hairs are thin and soft, they are very difficult to cut off. However, after 10 days they will disappear by themselves. Tua said. I see. Xiao Xian didn't feel embarrassed at all. Instead, he became more interested in the white hairs. Anyway, the team leader asked them to take a break. Xiao Xian had nothing to do. He simply pulled out several white hairs from the ground and put the poison sac at one end. What do you want to do? Still playing? Kiki couldn't help but walk over. Xiao Xian didn't answer directly. Instead, he asked, Can I light a fire here? No, you can't. Kiki shook his head hard. The trees and grass around here don't like fire. When we spend the night in the woods, we don't light a fire. Those trees will attack us. What about a torch? Xiao Xian asked again. A small torch will do. Kiki was relieved when he knew that Xiao Xian was only going to light a small fire. Ta was standing on the side, holding the animal skin roll with the target drawn on it. Hearing that, he moved his eyes away from the animal skin roll and looked at Xiao Xian. He suddenly frowned. He didn't expect that Xiao Xian would still want to play these little tricks after joining his team. Yes, in Ta's eyes, setting traps and lassos were all little tricks, which were played by junior totem warriors or wounded warriors. He didn't care about them at all. The real warriors who admired the strong had to hunt with their own strength. The right way to hunt was to bring back the prey with a knife and a spear. Besides, those who played these little tricks would never become real warriors. The more Ta thought about it, the more dissatisfied he became. When he saw that Kiki was still helping him find the branches, Ta snorted heavily. Seeing the team leader's attitude, the others who wanted to go closer to have a look gave up. Whether they could stay in the advance group was only a word from the team leader. Why should they make the team leader unhappy? It was rare that the team leader made an exception and recruited them, but Xian still wanted to play. Why should he do that? Kiki helped Xiao Xian find a dead tree nearby. He broke off a branch and lit a fire. Xiao Xian used the fire to burn the end of the white hair with the poison sac. The white hair quickly turned black after being burned by the fire. It rolled into a ball and shrank back. Just in case, Xiao Xian burned more of the end with the poison sac. Please hold it for me. Xiao Xian handed the lit branch to Kiki, and then took out a small stone knife. He pressed the burned white hair on the trunk next to him and stroked it with the knife. After being stroked by the knife, the end of the white hair that had condensed into a small black ball directly fell off. What was left in Xiao Xian's hand was a section of white hair without the poison sac. Chapter 77. Seeing that Xiao Xian had really removed the poison sac from the white hair, Kiki was so surprised that he made a sound of eh. And this sound had a high drawl to show his surprise. The rest of the people who were resting over there felt as if their hearts were being scratched by a cat's paw. They wanted to go over and take a look, but they were afraid of being disliked by the team leader. They could only sit there and continue to wait, but their eyes were fixed on Kiki. Unfortunately, Kiki, the big guy, blocked everyone's view. The crowd was so angry that they wanted to throw a hammer at Kiki. If you want to look, just look. Why are you blocking us? Tua didn't care too much. After treating the wounds of his companions, he walked to Keek's side and squatted down, watching Xiao Xian work. In fact, Xiao Xian was just trying. Even if the white hair was hard to cut, it was still a plant and should be afraid of fire. He didn't expect it to work. Looking at the white hairs of different lengths on his hand, Xiao Xian twisted his fingers. Kiki saw Xiao Xian holding 2 white hairs, twisting and pulling with his fingers. The 2 white hairs were tightly connected. After a short while, the white hairs on Xiao Xian's hand, which had been removed from the poison sac, were all connected into a 2-meter-long string. It was a bit elastic after being pulled. Keek's was dragged out longer, and his tone was raised higher. The people sitting on the side felt their hearts being scratched by a cat's paw again and again. They were so angry that they wanted to kick Kiki aside. Fuck, can't you just go aside and watch? But in the end, they didn't dare to challenge the team leader's temper. They still didn't go over. Asa wanted to go over and see what Xiao Xian was doing. Unexpectedly, as soon as he took a step, he saw the team leader's sharp eyes. He had no choice but to take back his foot. Although he couldn't go over, Asa pried a piece of soil from his foot and threw it at Kiki. Bang! The soil directly hit Keek's back, and the soil was smashed into pieces. Kiki ignored him completely. Seeing Xiao Xian pulling the elastic rope made of white hair, he was also tempted. This person never knew what it meant to be polite. He directly snatched the thread from Xiao Xian's hand. Give it to me. Xiao Xian gave it to Kiki without hesitation. Then he continued to collect the white hairs around him. Tua had nothing to do, so he also helped to collect them. Kiki stood up and pulled the string, but it didn't break. It was really bouncy. Hey, this line is really interesting, Kiki shouted. Asa glanced at Ta, only to see the veins on Ta's forehead bulging. Kiki turned his wrist and rolled up the 2 ends of the thread, probably to see if it could be broken. When there was only a small piece of the thread left, he pulled hard. When Keek's hand was about to bleed, the rope finally broke with a bang, and the place where it broke was not the joint. Ah, this is good. Xian, what are you going to do with this? Kiki moved his wrist, which was bleeding, and asked. When I have time, I want to set a trap and see if I can catch something, Xiao Xian said. The team leader's face became even darker. Ta thought to himself that he would not take this guy with him next time, nor would he let him join the advance group. When Ta announced the end of the break, Xiao Xian had already collected and connected a lot of white hairs. He rolled them up and put them in his animal skin bag. These white hairs were very light and weightless. They looked like a big roll, but in fact they were like small dried fruits. Next, they still went to hunt those jumping fruits. Those jumping fruits that had escaped from the mother tree would lose their ability to move as long as they cut a piece of them. Everyone in the hunting group was experienced, so they could hit the target 7 or 8 times out of 10. As for Xiao Xian, he was not even qualified to pick up the fruits that had lost their ability to jump on the ground. He was dismissed by the team leader. Stay aside, don't get in our way. Xiao Xian did not complain, but just watched carefully to see how the others cut those fruits. Those fruits moved very fast, and there were many of them when they escaped. They were dazzling and could easily distract people's attention. Therefore, everyone kept their eyes on one fruit, and then cut the next one. At the same time, they had to estimate the movement of those fruits in their minds. Jumping fruits might not be as emotional as animals, but they knew how to avoid harm. Once they were not careful, they would escape. Xiao Xian hid behind the tree, and found a chance to cut 6 fruits. Those jumping fruits that had escaped from the mother tree might stay outside for 1 or 2 days before returning to the mother tree. If they could not return to the mother tree in time for some reason, those fruits would wither directly, or be eaten by other animals, or take root and grow into new plants. What the shaman needed was not the flesh of those jumping fruits, but the core. The flesh was eaten by the advance group. Therefore, most of the time the food that the advance group ate was vegetarian. They did not stop until all the fruits on the jumping fruit tree had left. They would pick up the fruits on the ground that could not jump, and put them into their animal skin bags. When they were hungry, they would eat the flesh and keep the core. In addition to the core of the jumping fruit, the hunting group also cut down the roots of a kind of muddy plant. That plant was different from the others. Its branches and leaves grew under the mud, while its roots grew upwards, reaching out of the mud. They only needed to be careful not to step into the swamp. The hunting group used the looping method. One person used a straw rope to tie the roots of the plant, and the other used a stone knife to cut off the main root. It sounded simple, but it was very difficult to operate. It required a lot of skills, and it also tested the teamwork of the partners. If the main root could not be cut off in time, the roots that were exposed outside of the swamp would immediately shrink down. Once the roots were under the swamp, it would be hard to find a chance to cut them off, and they would have a great chance to escape. Of course, if they could not even tie the roots, then they would not be able to do anything. As for Xiaoxian's task, Ta asked him to pick up those muddy tree roots. If you asked Xiaoxian how he felt at the moment, he would say, "Oh, I'm just a walk-on." At night, the hunting group rested on a huge tree. There was a hole in the tree, which was specially dug out. Not only this tree, there were holes in the other huge trees as well. However, it depended on luck. Sometimes the holes were occupied by birds and beasts, and if they could not fight for them, they had to find other trees. Xiaoxian saw them pick a kind of fruit. After burning it slightly, the fruit would emit thick smoke. They would throw the smoking fruit into the tree hole. Soon, some of the little bugs in the tree holes or tree trunks would come out from the smoke and fall to the ground. When the smoke was finished, all kinds of wriggling insects would fall to the ground. While they were throwing the smoked insects into the tree hole, Xiaoxian was busy with his line. Someone in the hunting group was on guard duty, so Xiaoxian did not have to worry too much. However, Ta was very dissatisfied with Xiaoxian's behavior. When Xiaoxian asked Ta for instructions, Ta kept a cold face. After a long time, he finally responded with an angry voice, as if Xiaoxian had done something shameful. Xiaoxian actually knew that Ta did not plan to take him with them next time, and he did not want to follow them next time. Although there were all kinds of benefits in the advance group, he still preferred to hunt with Mai and the others. He had always been treated like an ornament in the advance group, and Ta, who disagreed with him and was bossy, he did not feel good staying here. It was better to participate in the hunting. The person who was throwing the fruit into the tree hole above the huge trunk turned around and saw Xiaoxian pointing his finger in the forest not far away. He asked his teammate beside him, "What is he doing? Setting a trap, maybe?" The other person said uncertainly, "What can we get at night? We don't need it anyway. Besides, doesn't he know that the boss hates this kind of method? Who knows? If he wants to play, just let him play. I think the boss doesn't plan to take him with us next time. Then let's leave him alone." For many people in the advance group, Xiaoxian was neither a family member nor a teammate. He would not have much to do with them in the future, so they did not include him in their group. There were also factions in the tribe. When the insects stopped falling from the tree hole above, Ta said to the others, "Okay, let's go up. It's getting dark." Xiaoxian had just finished his work, so he followed the others to climb up the tree. As Kiki had said, there was rarely a fire in this place, so they did not light a fire when they slept in the tree hole at night. They blocked the hole with big leaves, and soon they began to feel sleepy. Of course, some people would take turns to keep watch at night. That was necessary. Xiaoxian had already eaten when he was under the tree, so he was not hungry. On the vast green land outside, as the night fell, there were all kinds of sounds coming from far and near. It was the sound of some plants closing their leaves or flowers. Listening to those sounds, Xiaoxian fell asleep in a daze, until he was woken up by a buzzing sound at night. The others were also woken up, but they went back to sleep when they saw that the night watchers did not warn them. Xiaoxian listened carefully to those sounds, trying to distinguish the number and size of the prey in the trap from the sounds. However, he was not as good as Old Ku, so his estimation was not accurate. It was night now, so Xiaoxian could not go out to check the traps, so he could only wait until dawn. He did not expect to hunt any treasures, but just wanted to see what kind of things would be in this place at night. After all, this might be his only chance to come here, so he wanted to see more. Let's wait until tomorrow. We'll know tomorrow. Plus equals new week. Please recommend me. Chapter 78. Xiaoxian slept soundly in the second half of the night. He hadn't dreamed for a long time, but this night he dreamed of something. Actually, Xiaoxian didn't know what he was dreaming about. It was a sea of green, flowing green. His whole body was surrounded by this refreshing green. Every time he breathed in the green, Xiao Xian felt comfortable all over, as if every part of his body had been washed clean. It was as if the dusty ground had been washed clean by cool water. His whole body seemed to have been purified. Xiao Xian didn't feel as nervous and depressed as before. He only felt very carefree, relaxed like never before. The tiredness and all kinds of unhappiness from hunting became negligible. He couldn't wait to raise his head and roar. All the changes were silent, but they were shocking. In the morning, when the sun came out, everyone was awakened by all kinds of noises from the green land. However, it was a soldier's hurried voice that woke everyone up. "Boss! Boss, go and have a look." The soldier had just climbed up from under the tree. He leaned against the entrance of the tree hole and said to Ta, who was reading an animal skin roll. Everyone was still yawning, but they immediately woke up. The soldier's tone clearly indicated that he had found something very special. Although it wasn't threatening, it should be strange enough. Not only Ta but the others also followed him down. Xiao Xian was the last to come out of the tree hole. He looked down at the entrance of the tree hole. The people in the team who had just hurried down were all gathered around the trap he had set last night. "What the hell is this? It looks so strange. Are these hands and feet? The hands and feet of a tree. Is this thing dead? I poked it but it didn't move. It should be dead. Take it off and have a look." "How do we do this?" Just pull it off." "Kiki, stop. Get away. You don't know how to control your strength." There was a circle of people there. Ta asked someone to untie the thing that was tied to the noose, but he found that he had no idea where to start. The thread that was tied to the noose was made of the same white hair as yesterday. It was not easy to cut it, and he had to be careful not to break the thing tied to the noose. Tua held the stone knife and gestured for a long time, but he still gave up. He stretched his neck and looked around. When he saw Xiao Xian coming down from the tree, he hurriedly called out, "Xian, come here quickly. There's something in your trap." The people who had been arguing noisily just now suddenly quieted down. This trap was set up by Xiao Xian the night before, and he actually managed to hunt something tonight. Last night, someone even mocked and ridiculed him. Asua glanced at the team leader who was standing next to him. The team leader was expressionless and seemed to be deep in thought. He did not seem to have heard Tuo's call for Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian walked over. The people who had been crowding around quickly moved aside to let Xiao Xian come closer. Last night, Xiao Xian did not set too many traps. After all, he was not familiar with this place, and he did not have the support of others. In addition, he was pressed for time, and no one would wait for him. Therefore, he only set two at random. He also found that a tree not far away was secreting a very sticky gum, so he got some of it. But now there was something stuck to the spot where he applied the resin. It looked like a simple skeleton made of green branches. It had legs and hands, but it didn't have any complicated fingers. It had 3 toes that were slightly longer and looked like claws. Xiao Xian did not expect this kind of gum to be so sticky after it was slightly dried. When he took it out yesterday, it was just like ordinary glue, but now it was directly upgraded to a special glue. He originally thought that if there was something that ran fast at night, he would first use the gum to stick it. Even if it could run again after being stained with the gum, its speed would be reduced. At this time, the noose would also bind the object that passed by here. In the other trap, there was a brown ball the size of a soccer ball. A gust of wind blew, and the ball that was originally trapped in the net made of white threads suddenly made a buzzing sound. Then it flew in the direction of the wind. However, because it was trapped by the net made of white threads, it was pulled back again. Due to the force, it bounced back and forth, causing the white threads to make a vibrating sound. "So the noise we heard last night was made by this ball," said the night watchman. "I heard it yesterday too. I didn't expect it to be a ball like this." "Boss, what is this thing?" asked Ta. Ta moved his gaze away from the strange green skeleton and looked at the ball that was still bouncing on the white threads. He took out the animal skin roll and opened it to the back 1/3 of the roll. They would carefully search for the first 2/3 of the animal skin roll every time they came here. Excluding the seasonal factors, they could find most of the things that could be found at this time of the year. The last 1/3 of the animal skin roll was extremely difficult to find. In the shaman's words, it was lucky to find it. Because of this, they did not look for it on purpose. In the past, the seniors rarely found the things listed at the back of the animal skin roll. A few years ago, Gigu, the team leader of another hunting group and a candidate for chief like Ta, found a kind of plant at the end of the animal skin roll. After he presented it to the shaman, he was greatly praised by the shaman. Since then, he had a higher position in the shaman's heart. Gigu's name was given by the shaman, and he was the shaman's grandnephew. In terms of relationship, he was naturally closer to Gigu than Ta. If Ta's father was not the chief, he would not have a chance to compete with Gigu. Especially in the recent 2 years, Gigu's results had always been better than Ta's. That was why Ta was so anxious to find more curly-tailed plants. He even had to turn his attention to Xiaoxian. But Ta did not expect that they would really find them. What made Ta feel even more complicated was that these things were all caught by Xiaoxian. Yesterday, he had thought that these things were small tricks that could only wear down one's willpower. Today he felt like he had been slapped in the face loud and clear. If Ta had known that he could use this method to catch the things listed at the end of the animal skin roll, he would never have despised these little tricks. This is the wind ball, one of the pictures at the end of the animal skin roll. Ta pointed at a round picture near the end of the animal skin roll. Xiaoxian also moved closer to have a look. The picture on the animal skin roll was very simple, but the holes on the ball were exactly the same as the one they caught. Hey, that's great. Asa rubbed his hands and said happily. After all, if they found the curly-tailed plants, they would have more achievements recorded in the shaman's name. The others also looked happy. What about the other one? Tua asked. Everyone quieted down, waiting for Ta's answer. When they were looking at the wind ball, they did not see this kind of plant in the picture at the end of the animal skin roll. The foot of that thing was stuck to the place where the gum was smeared on, and the lower part of its body was entangled by the white thread. Because of this, it could not escape even if it lifted one of its feet. In addition, they found that this thing had arms and legs, and a torso made up of several green branches. The only thing missing was the head. Ta looked at the bracket without the head with a strange expression. When I first joined the advanced group, the shaman and the former team leader told us something. Ta pointed at the green skeleton that was tied up, and said, "It looks like a plant that the shaman once mentioned, the green thief." The green thief? What's that? Is it useful? The shaman didn't draw it on the animal skin roll. The others said. Ta's smile made people feel creeped out. Is it useful? It's useful. It's very useful. If it's really the green thief, we'll have made a great contribution. It's said that the medicine made from the green thief can make people have better night vision. Hearing this, everyone took a deep breath. Then their breaths became heavier and faster. Night vision, this was what they had always wanted. Why were they so afraid of the dark? Because in the dark, their eyesight was greatly reduced. Even the middle level and senior totem warriors were afraid of the dark. Therefore, the hunting team rarely hunted at night. Instead, they hid in caves or tree holes. The warriors in the tribe had hunted all kinds of beasts and ferocious beasts, many of which were nocturnal. Some people once said that people could see more clearly at night after eating the eyes of those nocturnal animals. But in fact it was not true. At least, people who had eaten the eyes of nocturnal animals did not feel much improvement. Maybe it was effective, but the effect was minimal. If it was really the green thief. Chapter 79. While the others were immersed in the green thief and the night vision ability, Xiaoxian carefully observed the trap he set yesterday. In fact, there was a lot of gum on that tree, but not much of it was enough to make the trap stick. Xiaoxian found that the gum flowing out from different parts of the same tree had different adhesion. He only got a little bit of gum when he cut the bark and smeared it around the noose, but only made 2 nooses. The ground was covered with a layer of moss and grass when they were cleaning up the insects yesterday, so the area around the big tree they were resting on was clean. There was still a little smell of insects, so many animals would avoid it. But now Xiaoxian found some traces of gum on the ground. The tree he cut yesterday had a lot of gum flowing out, but it was not sticky enough. There were some traces of being dragged on the gum beside the tree. Apparently, something had stepped on it. The warriors in the hunting group did not touch it, or there would be obvious footprints. After thinking for a while, Xiaoxian looked around and fixed his eyes on a plant nearby. The tall tree was full of big flowers, and when the wind blew, He could see some pollen sprinkling on it. Team leader, I want to pick a flower. Xiaoxian asked. Tower had told him to ask for permission before doing anything, and he was not allowed to act on his own. Tower looked at Xiaoxian and said, okay. In the past, Tower would not allow Xiaoxian to pick flowers, because it was too boring in his eyes. But now, he felt that Xiaoxian might have found something. Xiaoxian climbed up the tree and tried to break the flower but failed. He had to cut it with his stone knife, and then held the receptacle, asking Tuo to catch it. After cutting 2 flowers in a row, Xiaoxian got down from the tree. Tuo, who caught the flower, had a lot of pollen on him. He had no choice because there was too much pollen. Xian, what do you want to do with it? Tuo asked. I want to see if there are any traces on the ground, Xiaoxian said. Traces? The people surrounding the green thief also looked at Xiaoxian. Xiaoxian held the flower receptacle and tilted the flower towards the ground. With a shake of his hand, the orange-red pollen sprinkled down. Everyone watched as Xiaoxian hugged the flowers and walked around the tree that was dripping with gum. He patted here and there, and soon, the ground beneath his feet was covered in a layer of orange pollen. After sprinkling the pollen, Xiaoxian found a suitable leaf and fanned it like a fan. A layer of pollen on the ground was blown away, but some remained. The footprints made of orange-red pollen could be vaguely seen, just like the feet of the green thief who was tied there. Looking at the footprints on the ground, Tower raised his head and said to everyone, do as I say, especially where there is resin. The tree that Xiaoxian touched was not the only tree with gum. Yesterday, when Tower was investigating the surrounding area, he saw several trees, and the gum around each tree was flowing to the ground. The area was quite wide. At Tower's order, the people plucked the flowers that bloomed early in the morning and shook off the pollen. For a moment, the pollen and leaves were flying in the forest. Fortunately, there was no danger nearby. After a while, when the pollen was all shaken off and blown off, everyone fell silent. On the ground where there was resin, there were many footprints. Because they were in the forest, the footprints were not obvious. Even the outline of the 3 toes could not be seen. But everyone knew that they were the same footprints as before, and they were all heading in the same direction. There were a lot of orange-red footprints, not to mention the places where there was no resin or where there were too many fallen leaves and weeds. Therefore, the footprints could not be shown by the pollen. Obviously, a huge night marching army had passed by the tree where they were resting last night, but the night watchers did not hear their footsteps, except for the one trapped by Xiaoxian's trap. Tower had been hunting in the advance group for many years, but he had never seen a night marching army made of plants like this. The green thief silent at night. The reason why the green thief was not listed on the animal skin roll was that it was too difficult to find and could be very dangerous. The ancestors knew that it was difficult to hunt at night, and many people had died because of it. Therefore, they had no choice but to give up this tempting target. Therefore, the green thief and other plants that were extremely difficult to find were removed from the animal skin rolls that were later drawn. For nearly 100 years, none of the advance group had ever seen the green thief. If Ta hadn't heard about it from his grandfather and some senior warriors in the tribe, he wouldn't have been able to connect it to the green thief. For him, the green thief had always been a legend, and he had always envied the ancestors who had found the green thief. However, he did not expect that he would be able to catch one today. Although he was caught by Xiaoxian's trap, and Tower knew that he had been slapped in the face, he felt that it was worth it to see the green thief. Tower said with difficulty, "The green thief silent at night. The green thief silent at night. It's really the green thief. Boss, let's untie the noose and put it away, in case something else takes it away." Yes. I'll go to the tree hole to get the wooden box." Is the wooden box okay? Should we use the stone box? How about we take them all? How can we store one? Cut it? I don't know if the green thief can be taken away. What if it withers and disappears as soon as we leave? Kiki muttered. Shut up, Kiki. The others shouted in unison. However, this noose is too tight. Xian, how do you untie it? Tua looked at Xiaoxian, who was standing not far away. However, Xiaoxian did not pay attention to Tua and the others at the moment. He was now seeing something. It was a little blurry, and the surrounding sounds seemed to fade away. It was quiet all around. 1, 2, 10, 100 thousands. Tens of thousands, maybe even more. Those green figures were walking in a group towards one direction. Compared to the green thief he caught, this group of green thieves had a head, which was like an upside-down mop. When the green thieves stood up, they were actually about the same height as Xiao Xian. They were all as thin as bamboo, quietly walking through the woods. Xian! Hey Xian, what's wrong with you? The people over there wanted to continue shouting, but were stopped by Ta. Did he see something? Said. What did he see? There was nothing but trees around. Could it be that the ancestors had shown up? Thinking of this, the people all trembled at the same time, but they did not dare to shout anymore. Hey, he moved, Kiki said in a low voice. On the other side, Xiao Xian was walking in the same direction as the green thieves. But after a few steps, he looked towards the trap again. Hey, he's looking at us, Kiki said. Kiki, shut up, Ta shouted in a low voice. Xiao Xian had been watching the green thieves walk past him, and some of them even went through his body, as if he did not exist. Xiao Xian unconsciously followed them, walking in the same direction. But the green thieves were too fast for him to keep up. Xiao Xian felt like he was being assimilated, but he quickly broke away from the feeling of being assimilated. He looked towards the trap as if he sensed something. The others thought that Xiao Xian was looking at them, but in fact Xiao Xian was looking at the green thief that was tied up by the lasso. After being tied up, the green thief found that it could not escape with its whole body, and its head was separated from its body. It was not dead, but like a gecko that lost its tail, it left a part of its body and escaped. When the time was right, it would grow back into a complete body. Xiao Xian moved his eyes away from the trap and looked towards the direction where the green thieves were marching. He saw a green thief walking perpendicularly to the trunk of a tree, with its toes touching the trunk as if it were walking on flat ground. When it was about 15 meters above the ground, it reached out its hand and poked it into the trunk. Then it quickly pulled it out and just like before, it walked down the tree and continued walking with the army. What was there? Xiao Xian walked over, looked at the tree and climbed up. Ta, who had been watching Xiao Xian, signaled the others to protect him in case of any accidents. He wanted to find something with Xiao Xian's help, but he also promised the shaman that he would bring him back safely. On the other side, Xiao Xian climbed to the spot where the green thief poked the tree. He saw a small hole, and a green bean sprout-like thing stuck out from it. Looking at the bean sprout, Xiao Xian pinched it with his fingers and pulled it out. Although the bean sprout was not big, it still took some effort to pull it out. Seeing the thing that Xiao Xian pulled out was the same color as the green thief, Ta's eyes flashed. The seedling of the green thief? The green thief with a green body walked in the night, stealing the life of the tree for its own reproduction. It was said that the night marching army formed by the green thieves would only appear once a year. Was it really the blessing of the ancestors? I didn't have time on Sunday, so I'd like to thank the readers who voted for this book last week. This book seemed to be the first place in the last issue. I didn't see the display of Sanjiang Hanlin Academy, but it was said to be the first place. In this regard, Chen Ci bowed to thank the readers who voted for this book. It was a pity that the popular book Return of the Cat didn't get the first place. He didn't expect this book to get the first place. So thank you. Chapter 80. When Xiao Xian came down from the tree, the crowd gathered around him immediately. They had all heard what Ta had said. Is this the seedling of the green thief? Tua stared at the sprout in Xiao Xian's hand, which was smaller than a finger. Can it be eaten? Kiki pushed the people in front of him aside. He was about to take the sprout from Xiao Xian's hand, but was stopped by Ta Heng's arm. Let me have a look, Ta said. Seeing Ta come over, Xiao Xian handed over the sprout in his hand. As for Kiki's question about whether it could be eaten, Xiao Xian thought it should be. He didn't feel anything special when he held it in his hand, but Ta thought it was the seedling of the green thief. Xian, how did you know there was this seedling? Did you see anything just now? Ta asked. They had just seen Xiao Xian walk over there as if he had seen something, and climb up the tree to pull down the seedling. Just now. Xiao Xian scratched his head, as if he was trying hard to recall. He said, just now, someone told me there was something there, so I walked over. You turned around just now. What did you see? Ta stared into Xiao Xian's eyes and asked. Xiao Xian didn't avoid Ta's gaze and continued, "It seemed that someone was calling me, so I turned around." "Calling you? Who was calling you? Was it your ancestor?" The crowd thought of this at the same time. "Apart from this one, are there any other seedlings like this one?" Ta asked. Xiao Xian frowned, as if he was in a dilemma. "Think about it carefully." Ta slowed down his tone. Xiao Xian lowered his head, as if he was trying hard to recall. In fact, he was just pretending. By now, the images of the green thieves had disappeared. But he had some recollection of the seedlings on the trees around him. If the person who asked was old Ku, Xiao Xian might have a good explanation. But to Ta, Xiao Xian did not intend to tell the truth. Since everyone thought that he was blessed by the ancestors, then he would give the credit to the ancestors. It would save him the trouble of finding excuses. After thinking for 2 minutes, Xiao Xian pointed out some trees around them. Ta didn't care about anything else and hurriedly directed everyone to look for the trees that Xiao Xian had pointed out. Now everything else had to be put aside. Although there were still many things on the animal's skin roll that they had not found, the green thief was enough to make up for it. It was even better than the things they had found in the past. Even if these little saplings were not completely confirmed, they were still worth searching for. Xiao Xian didn't point to every tree, but every tree was carefully searched. They searched almost inch by inch. Xiao Xian couldn't tell them exactly where they were. At that time he only paid attention to one of the trees, and that was the only one he could tell the specific location of. "Hey, I found it!" Asa shouted happily, as if he couldn't wait to swallow the seedling in his hand. If Ta wasn't watching him, he probably would have eaten it. Seeing this, Ta handed the long stone box with the headless green thief in it to Xiao Xian. "You take it first. I'll go and look for it too. Don't wander around, just wait here." "Okay, I know." Xiao Xian took the stone box and leaned against a tree to rest. The reason why he could see those illusory images just now should be because of another special ability in his body. In the past he could foresee danger, but now he seemed to be able to see things in the past. It was just that Xiao Xian couldn't use it freely yet. While he was resting, Xiao Xian suddenly looked down at the ground under his feet. It seemed that something was going to come out from the ground. But the others didn't notice it at all. Maybe it was because they were all in the trees and didn't touch the ground, so they didn't realize that something was coming fast from the ground. "Something is coming," Xiao Xian said. Almost at the moment when Xiao Xian said the last word, a flaming red vine came out from the ground. Fortunately, Xiao Xian reacted quickly. When he shouted, he had already jumped up, using the trees next to him to jump higher. "It's the fire spear. Xian, run!" The people who were looking for the green thief seedling in the trees quickly retreated. "I was careless." Ta pulled out the stone axe hanging on his waist and threw it out. Crack! A sound like a hard piece of wood being split was heard. A flaming red vine that was as thick as an adult's arm that was reaching towards Xiao Xian was cut off. Blood-like liquid spurted out from the broken part and spilled on the ground. However, he only managed to cut off the tip of the vine. The vine that still had blood on it continued to chase after Xiao Xian. Moreover, there were more than 10 vines coming out from the ground. According to Xiao Xian's estimation, there were at least 50 vines coming out from the ground, not including the short and thin ones. He didn't know if there were more vines that hadn't come out yet. After everyone retreated, the pressure on Xiao Xian's side was greatly reduced. His current strength was limited, so he couldn't withstand these vines that were so powerful. Although they were just vines, they were different from the red vines that Xiao Xian had seen before. The red vines directly swept their prey away, and didn't have such strong attacking power. The ones that appeared now were like spears, thrusting directly at Xiao Xian. The tree where Xiao Xian had been standing at the beginning had already been pierced 3 times, and that was only in the blink of an eye. Fire spear, because the vines were as sharp as spears when they shot out, and the fine hairs on the vines looked like fire when they floated up. That was how it got its name. The hairs on each vine were used to absorb, whether it was the sap of plants or the flesh and blood of humans. People who often hunted in this green land were no strangers to this plant, so Ta and the others knew how to deal with it. While Xiao Xian was dodging, he also paid attention to the movements of Ta and the others. This kind of behavior of the veterans in hunting was worth learning from the newbies. Now was the time to learn more. For those experienced veterans, although they didn't have fancy body movements or fancy moves, They were all skills that had been honed through countless hunting experiences. Sometimes their reflexes were faster than their thinking, and it was almost an instinctive reaction. It was a simple but practical killing move. The 20 people who had retreated and entered battle mode quickly coordinated with each other. Their attack power suddenly increased explosively, bringing with it a fierce aura that did not lose out to fire spear. Holding their respective weapons, they waved their arms non-stop. The strong and fierce strength passed through the weapons in their hands, bringing with it the sound of the wind, and smashed the waving fiery red vines. Wave after wave of attacks hit the vines. If one of them made a mistake, their momentum would be weakened. Even if the opponent was not a dire beast, they still had to compete with momentum. In the blink of an eye, a large area of the ground was dyed red. Seeing that the crisis in front of them was about to pass, a series of banging sounds came from the ground. It turned out that Fire Spear's vines had broken out of the ground, and its original exposed body had more than doubled. It seemed that it would not stop until it was dead. What made Xiao Xian even more depressed was that many of the vines that broke out of the ground were coming towards him. "Xian, stay away!" Ta shouted over there. However, after Ta shouted, he found that Xiao Xian, who was running away, turned around and came back. Seeing this, Ta was so angry that he wanted to vomit blood. "Damn it, I told you to stay away, why did you come back? To drag us down? Do you think we are not busy enough here?" If it were in the past, Ta would not choose to fight with Fire Spear but leave with his teammates. However, there were many green thief seedlings here, and he did not want to leave. He thought that the others had the same idea as him. They had no intention of retreating, so they were all in a killing frenzy. Well, it was not easy to find some green thief seedlings, but they were interrupted by Fire Spear. Many trees around were also destroyed, which made it more difficult to find the seedlings. What was more annoying was that there was a kid who was causing trouble here. A strong anger flashed in Tower's eyes. He suddenly exerted strength in his legs and stepped on a thick vine. The vine under his feet suddenly burst apart like a heavy object falling down. The fine hairs on the vine that wrapped around Tower's feet were also torn apart in an instant. Ta held the stone axe in his hand and chopped repeatedly. The air was filled with the sound of cloth being torn apart, and the sound of hardwood being chopped off. While chopping, Ta was also running towards Xiao Xian. At this moment he wanted to kick Xiao Xian as far away as possible. Ta hated people who dragged the team down. However, Ta had only taken 2 steps forward when he found that behind Xiao Xian, there was an equally huge Fire Spear. It was chasing after Xiao Xian with a murderous look, with spear-like vines breaking out of the ground. No wonder that kid ran back. Chapter 81. Xiao Xian was running back with the stone box containing the green thief in his arms. He had planned to run away from the battlefield, as he knew that he would only be a burden if he stayed there. However, after a few steps he suddenly felt a sense of danger. With his special vision, he saw another green object that looked like a fire spear approaching him from the ground. Since he woke up this morning, Xiao Xian found that all the plants in his vision were green. However, most of them were pale green, almost transparent. But the fire spear was darker in color. The road ahead was blocked. Xiao Xian wanted to run in another direction, but he found that both the fire spear and the one that appeared now seemed to be targeting him. Was it for the green thief? Or was it for Xiao Xian? No matter whether the fire spear was targeting Xiao Xian himself or the stone box containing the green thief, Xiao Xian could not deal with it, so he had to retreat. Xiao Xian quickened his pace as he touched the animal skin bag hanging on his waist. Ta was confident that he could deal with one fire spear quickly. Even if he could not kill it, he could at least force it to retreat. But now there was another one, and both fire spears were aggressive. It was difficult to deal with them. Ta cut off a part of the vine. He did not have time to wipe off the blood on his face. He shouted to the others, "Half of you go and deal with the other one." But it was impossible to deal with the 2 fire spears in a short time with only Ta and the others. At the same time, they were worried that there might be a 3rd or a 4th fire spear. In that case, would they have to give up this place? They were unwilling to give up, but they did not slow down at all. They were a little impatient. What was the most important thing for a plant? The root system. However, these plants that could run freely knew how to protect their roots well. They even buried their roots deep underground, making it difficult to attack their roots. Especially for a fire spear, which was as fierce as a predator. If you attacked its weak point and could not kill it with one blow, you would be the one to die. Unfortunately, no one had the confidence to do so. Even Ta and the others who often fought with the fire spear would either avoid it or take it head-on. While Ta and the others were trying to figure out a way to force the two fire lances back, a magnified image of the noose had already formed in Xiao Xian's mind. There wasn't enough thread, so he could only make an incomplete lock. He couldn't just rely on Ta and the rest now. Xiao Xian wanted to contribute too. After all, they were a team. Success and failure were linked together. According to Xiao Xian's calculation of the success rate, the incomplete trap was worth a try. Xiao Xian had never tried such a large-scale trap before, so he didn't know how effective it would be. After all, expectations were not necessarily the same as reality. But no matter what the effect was, as long as it had a little effect, it was fine. The current situation was not optimistic, and in a place like this, it was best to end the battle quickly. Xiao Xian held the stone box with one arm, while the other hand quickly took out a spearhead dart from the animal's skin bag and pulled out a white thread. Even though he only used one hand, he was still very flexible. His fingers moved quickly, and the white thread had already wrapped tightly around the tail of the spearhead dart. Whoosh! After dodging the vines, Xiao Xian threw the dart out with all his strength, but it was not aimed at the fire spear's vines, but at a point on the ground. The body of the dart, which was thrown out with great strength, pierced into the ground. The first point was set, and then the second point was ready. With Ta and the others restraining the fire spear, Xiao Xian could deal with it more easily. The position of his dodging was also very clever. He jumped up, fell down, and moved back and forth in succession, as if there was no pattern. But every time he dodged in a panic, it was actually carefully calculated. Everything was done in an instant. In the rumbling sound, the flaming red vines were swinging wildly, and countless stones and soil were lifted up from the ground by the vines. The sound of tree trunks being broken, soil flying, branches snapping, and vines being chopped all mixed together. The sound of the spearhead dart hitting the tree trunks, the ground, and the vines was too weak in this battlefield. Xiao Xian moved very fast, and it was hard to see what he was doing without careful observation. Xiao Xian's 5 fingers moved quickly, and his feet were not slow either. Every time he reached a preset point, he would complete a knot with a wave of his hand, because all the knots and connecting the nodes had to be completed in an instant. The muscles on his arms twitched continuously, and the totemic power in his body was running to the extreme, roaring and surging in every meridian. If one looked carefully, one would find that there was a layer of surging airflow around the arm where Xiao Xian was setting the noose. Xiao Xian held the stone box and ran around 2 fire spears that were close to him. Fast! 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 Setting a trap had to be fast, especially when it was set on the spot like this. Any extra movement of the prey would cause unexpected changes. In a few seconds, Xiao Xian had finished setting up the periphery of the noose, and there was only one more step left. Xiao Xian stepped on the vines with great force, and jumped away before the hairs wrapped around his ankles. Xian, what are you doing? Hey, don't run around. Seeing Xiao Xian running around the periphery, Tua and the others were very confused. Shouldn't he be hiding far away? It wants to steal the green thief. Xiao Xian roared. Steal the green thief? The fire spear's target was the green thief. Before anyone could say anything, Xiao Xian shouted again, I've set up a trap. Everyone be careful to stay away from it. As he spoke, Xiao Xian rushed between the 2 fire spears. Stop! Xian, what are you doing? Ta roared angrily. The crossfire between the 2 fire spears was not strong. Obviously, the 2 fire spears had no intention of fighting each other. That was why Xiao Xian dared to pass through them directly. Besides, with Xiao Xian's current speed, although he could not resist the fire spears, he could still dodge. Xiao Xian stepped on the vines and jumped up. His hands moved so fast that they seemed to disappear. The spearhead darts flew in several directions, and the knots were tied up in a flash while he was jumping. The trap was complete. Xiao Xian did not stop. Xiao Xian, who was holding the stone box, was a bait. No matter where he ran, the 2 fire spears would attack him. Because of that, Ta and the others followed behind Xiao Xian to block most of the attacks. A vine shot from below. Xiao Xian did not dodge, but blocked it with his teeth knife. Bang! A sound like rocks colliding with each other was heard. Tuo and the others saw Xiaoxian being whipped into the air. Kiki, who was closest to Xiaoxian, wanted to rescue Xiaoxian. If no one picked him up, Xiaoxian would fall directly to the ground. However, Kiki was shocked to find that the person who was whipped into the air and fell back down in a parabola stopped somewhere in the air. Yes, he stopped there. He was standing steadily. At the same time, the others seemed to hear some creaking sounds like wood being tightened. Not only Kiki but also Ta and the others opened their eyes wide. However, when they looked carefully, they found that Xiaoxian was not standing there in the air, but on a white line. When did the white line appear there? The crowd wasn't sure, but when they thought of what Xiaoxian said about setting a trap, it seemed like it might be useful. Everyone leave. Tuo Kiki Sua step back. Xiaoxian asked the people in the circle to leave. Although it might not hurt anyone, it was better to be safe than sorry. Standing on the white line, the trap in Xiaoxian's mind was very clear. Several vines shot at him, and at least one of them would fall into the trap. Although the two fire lances were separated, half of them were in the trap set by Xiaoxian. If any of the vines fell into the trap, it would trigger a series of lasso reactions. It was a chain trap. Xiaoxian felt that everything around him seemed to slow down, and time seemed to be stuck. Among the things he could see, there were only a few vines shooting at him, and some coils that others could not see clearly, but were getting clearer and clearer in his field of vision. Other than that, everything else was blurred into the background. Closer. It was getting closer. One of the vines was twisting, and the hairs on it were flashing like flames. It went through the coils in Xiaoxian's field of vision. It fell into the trap. Chapter 82. With the help of the white string, Xiaoxian leaped up and dodged a vine that shot straight at him. At the same time, he held the last spear dart in his hand. The remaining white string wrapped around the body of the dart. As Xiaoxian leaped, the white string tightened. Xiaoxian could clearly feel the pulling force from the body of the dart. Taking a deep breath, Xiaoxian quickly swung the spear dart to the left and right, and then pulled it back forcefully. Kill! Creak! The sound of sawing wood being snapped by steel wires sounded again. However, this time it was not just a few places that made the sound. Almost at the same time, the sound came from dozens of places at the same time, and the sound was sharper than before. Those who heard the sound felt as if they were seeing a thick tree trunk being tightened, and even their nerves were tensed up. Although Tuo, Kiki, and the others did not know what Xiaoxian wanted to do, they knew that they should try their best to cooperate with their teammates in such an emergency, even if they did not think that Xiaoxian could really do anything. Unexpectedly, as soon as they retreated, they heard the creaking sound that tickled their nerves. Everyone looked over trying to find the reason for the sound, but soon they were completely shocked by the scene in front of them. The originally loose net of ropes tightened in an instant. As the vines swung, some of the vines were entangled by the net. Feeling the binding force, the vines struggled even harder, and the more they struggled, the tighter the net of ropes wrapped around them. All these changes happened in less than a breath's time. Bang! 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 Immediately after the creaking sound, the sound of strings breaking or hardwood breaking rang out almost at the same time, making those who were tensed up feel as if their brains were about to explode. Along with these sounds, the blood of the fire lances splashed out. Whether it was the vines close to the ground or the vines in the air, the red liquid flowing in them splashed out almost at the same time along with the sounds. The blood-red liquid that was spurting out from the two different fire lances carried the violent killing intent that belonged to the predators of the plant world. It was like two flowers of blood that bloomed at the same time. They were even more colorful than the vines that were like flames. Tower used to think that the blood-red flowers drawn on the animal's skin roll were the flowers that looked the most like blood. However, at this moment, he realized that the scene in front of him had overturned his previous thoughts. Such a visual shock would leave a deep impression on him even after a long time. There was no smell of blood, but it was as if he had entered a slaughterhouse. One set of kill, one set of kill, one set of sure kill. Xiaoxian felt that he might be able to get a feel for Old Ku's method of killing. However, this half-finished lasso could only be regarded as a shortened version of the chain lasso, which was not a complete killing move. It was far from the level of a sure kill move that Old Ku had mentioned. If the white line was long enough, The center of the noose could be contracted into a net bag similar to the one used to tie up the wind ball. However, the fire lances were too big in size, and there was more than one of them. Without enough materials, Xiaoxian's noose could only encircle half of the 2 fire lances. However, it was enough to solve the problem in front of them. The broken white line shook and then fell down lightly. The splashing red liquid was like a flower blooming and then withering. The broken vines were thrown up and fell down again, in the blink of an eye. The 2 fire lances that were fierce just now withered. The fire lances had been chopped by Ta and the others for a while. After the noose was retracted, they were injured even more. They twisted their bodies and retrieved the injured and uninjured broken branches to the center. Then like a screw they drilled into the ground. After a short tremor they disappeared. The other fire lances were not as injured as the former. However, it was unknown whether they were afraid of the previous attack, or they knew that they had no chance of winning. They no longer persisted and drilled into the ground, leaving far away. The battlefield that had been booming just now quieted down again. Only broken branches and flowing red liquid with the smell of plants were left on the ground. Xiaoxian was panting heavily. The strength in his body was surging. When he was setting up the traps, he had almost reached his limit several times. His strength was almost depleted in a short time. Because he had used too much strength, in order to complete the trap in the shortest time possible, his arms, shoulders, and legs were all sore and numb. After he relaxed, his fingers trembled uncontrollably. It was estimated that they would not stop for a while. Xiaoxian was exhausted. He did not want to stand anymore. He lifted his feet and shook off the red liquid that flowed to his feet. He looked around and saw a broken branch as thick as a bucket behind him. He did not care about the red liquid on the branch and directly went to sit down. He also put the stone box that he was holding onto on the ground. The sound of Xiaoxian putting the stone box on the ground pulled everyone back to reality. Tua looked at the mess on the ground and then turned to look at Xiaoxian. When he was about to ask something, his arm was grabbed by Kiki. Tua was still nervous because of the scene just now. Kiki's grab startled him. He felt that his arm was going to be broken just like the fire spear vine. He almost swung his arm away. What are you doing? Tua shook his arm, trying to shake off the creepy feeling of being strangled. My legs are a little weak. Kiki frowned. It was rare for a person who was not afraid of anything to be so scared. Just now, he was closer to that side and planned to cut down another vine. In the end, that scene happened. 2 of the vines that were closer to him splashed liquid all over his body. It was completely different from the carefree feeling he had when he cut down the vines himself. Instead, he felt a chill in his heart. Xian, what was that just now? Tua asked after calming down. Hearing this, the others all looked at Xiaoxian. Just now? It was a trap. Xiaoxian replied. Tua and the others were in disbelief. How could a trap be set like that? Xiaoxian did not explain. In fact, such a large trap existed a long time ago. Some people in the tribe also used it. However, Old Ku said that people gradually abandoned this skill due to the pursuit of power. Plus, the stronger the prey, the higher the requirement for the material of the trap. The material was not easy to find. Later on, many people who liked to use the trap stopped using it. Therefore, there were even fewer traps that could be passed down. Looking up at the sky, the surrounding tall trees were almost all broken down, leaving an empty space. Under the blue sky, the broken branches and sawdust that were thrown up when the trap was closed had already fallen down. The only thing left was the white hair that was slowly floating in the breeze. Xiaoxian reached out and caught a piece of white hair that had fallen down. This broken piece was only half of its original length. The large coil of long wire that was connected with great difficulty had all broken. Most of it was broken into small pieces like this. After all, it was not a real steel wire. It was reasonable for it to be broken like this. If the white wire was stronger, the trap would have been set more perfectly, and the trap would have been closed faster. At the moment of closing, the vines would have been cut quickly, and the blood would not have splashed out like this. Then it would have really killed the vines without leaving a trace. Of course, it was precisely because there were still many flaws in the line of white hair that caused the visual effect and shock to be even stronger. Not only were Ta and the others shocked, but Xiaoxian was also shocked. He really did not expect such an effect. It was the first time he set up such a large trap, and the effect was much better than he expected. This was also thanks to the white wire. Unfortunately, as Old Ka said, the materials were hard to find. Ta looked at Xiao Xian with a complicated expression, and then asked the others to clean up the battlefield. They could not eat the broken branches, nor were they listed on the animal skin roll, so they threw them far away. As for the red liquid on the ground, Ta did not care. The fire spear was the predator here, and the blood of this predator would make many creatures retreat until the blood disappeared. The most fortunate thing was that the big tree that they stayed in yesterday was still there. At that time, in order to look for the seedlings of the green thief, they had left some distance away. Later, when they were fighting with the fire spear, they moved further away. Therefore, the tree only had some traces and holes on the trunk. At least the place where they slept tonight was still there. Chapter 83. According to Ta and the others, plants like the fire spear would not come back for a short period of time after their first failure. In addition, their blood would prevent other creatures from approaching. Therefore, the tree hole was safe for the time being, even safer than it had been in the past few days. Ta guessed that the 2 fire spears were here for the green thief. Without wasting any time, he took a few people with him to the swamp to get some mud. They covered the stone box with a layer of mud, and then wrapped it with a big leaf with a fragrant smell. They tied it with a straw rope, which could cover most of the smell of the green thief. This was also the method they used to cover up when they found plants with strong smells. The smell of the green thief was hard for humans to smell, but some plants and animals could sense it through other means. It was good to take some protective measures. Now, the people no longer underestimated Xiao Xian. Even though they still thought that setting traps was a small trick, they could not deny the benefits this method brought to them. As a result, the people's attitude towards Xiao Xian became much better. Maybe Xiao Xian was really protected by the ancestors, and that was why they could find the green thief. At the same time, Xiao Xian's ability could not be ignored. At least in the eyes of the people so far, Xiao Xian was much more successful than most of the newcomers in the tribe. After resting for a while, Ta led a group of people to continue searching around, to see if they could find more seedlings of the green thief. And Xiao Xian followed Tuo and Kiki to climb up the tree. The tree hole was in the middle of the trunk of the giant tree. Further up, the dense branches and leaves of the canopy were occupied by all kinds of birds. Although they were not big birds, and the largest one had a wingspan of about 1 meter, they had the advantage in numbers. Therefore, the people in the advance group usually did not go up there to provoke them. However, because of the chaotic battle of the fire spears, many birds were scared away. Most of the birds that stayed in their nests during the day were scared away. Therefore, after returning to the tree hole, Xiao Xian followed Tuo and Kiki to climb up the canopy to search for birds' nests, and picked up a lot of bird eggs. When they ate bird eggs in this place, Tuo and the others ate them raw. They didn't refuse any kind of bird eggs. Xiao Xian took out 3 eggs from a bird's nest. Strangely, the 3 eggs looked different even though they were in the same nest. In terms of size, the big one was a little bigger than an adult's fist, while the small one was about the size of an egg Xiao Xian had seen in his previous life. In terms of color, there were 3 eggs. One was purplish red, one had blue and white spots, and the last one was earthy yellow with some circular patterns on it. Are all of these edible? Xiao Xian asked. Kiki looked back and said, "Yes, I have eaten all of them." "Why do the eggs in the same nest look so different?" Xiao Xian asked as he carefully put the eggs into the animal skin bag filled with leaves. "Maybe those birds stole it from somewhere else," Kiki said carelessly. "Stolen?" Xiao Xian was surprised. Of course, with their size, how could they lay such eggs? There are only so many birds in your nest. Kiki gestured with his hands. How could such a small bird lay so many fist-sized eggs at once? But those birds have long and thin claws, so it must be very convenient for them to steal eggs. All the eggs here were stolen? Xiao Xian was surprised. All of them, Kiki said with certainty. Birds of a feather really flocked together. These were all egg-stealing birds. No matter what species they were, they all gathered together. They weren't afraid that the eggs in their nests would be stolen by other birds. After all, the eggs were not their own, so they didn't feel bad even if they were stolen. Thinking about it, these birds must have their own places of laying eggs, which were more hidden or bred in other special ways. While digging out the eggs, Xiao Xian found many eggs in the nests that were pecked open. There was some leftover egg white in the eggs, and in some eggs the larvae had already taken shape, but they were pecked until they were incomplete. These birds in the canopy stole the eggs to store as food. After filling the bag with eggs, they returned to the tree hole. Ta and the others searched for a long time, but they didn't find any more seedlings of the green thief. They might have been robbed by other creatures. Judging from the behavior of the fire spear, the green thief was indeed very popular. Fortunately, Xiao Xian's trap caught the green thief at night, and they got up early in the morning, so the green thief was not robbed. At the same time, it could be speculated that the creatures that were interested in the green thief were those that were active during the day, while the plants and animals that were active at night were not that interested in the green thief. In any case, they were lucky enough to catch the green thief and find a few seedlings of the green thief. Boss, will the seedlings die soon after they are pulled out? Asuo looked at the green seedlings in Ta's hand and asked. Hearing Asuo's words, the others also thought of the same thing. They had encountered similar situations before. After the seedlings were pulled out, no matter how careful they were or how they were covered with soil, they would die soon. The adult seedlings could not last as long as the seedlings. It's possible. How about we eat the seedlings? It'll be a waste if we don't eat them. Yes. What if we wake up tomorrow and find these seedlings dead? After all, the seedlings are not big green thieves, so they can't last long. They gathered together and discussed. If it were other plants in the past, they wouldn't be so nervous. But this was the green thief they were talking about. They hadn't encountered one for many years. The death of any seedling would be a great loss. In the end, Ta decided to eat all 6 seedlings of the green thief first. He also wanted to wait until the other team of 20 people met up, but he already felt the vitality of the seedlings in his hand was quickly draining. Ta pulled out half a leaf and ate it first. He was the strongest one here and also the leader of the team. He planned to try it himself first. If there were no problems, he would let the others eat it. The others stared at Ta, watching him eat the small half leaf. They didn't even want to blink, for fear of missing any details. How is it? Boss, how do you feel? Tho asked quickly. Ta sensed it carefully and shook his head. I don't feel anything except that my strength has recovered a little. The others were disappointed, but even so, they still ate the seedlings. Xiao Xian got a leaf, which was more than the others, but no one complained. In terms of merit, Xiao Xian got more than all of them combined. Xiao Xian could have kept the green thief for himself if it wasn't for the rule passed down by the hunting group in the tribe, which stated that the things they hunted must be shared with everyone. Just like the last time when Xiao Xian hunted the thorn black wind, he could have kept the green thief for himself. Therefore, the others knew in their hearts that they had gained a big advantage. They also planned to help Xiao Xian hunt more food on their way back. After the sun went down, not many birds flew back to their nests. The cha-cha birds on the trees were less than half, and the surroundings were much quieter. Those birds had other nests. When a disaster struck one place, they would hide in another, and come back when the disaster subsided. Before the night fell, Kiki asked Xiao Xian to set up a trap in the surrounding area to see if they could get something else tonight. The rope that connected the white hares was gone, so they could only use thinner vines and straw ropes to replace it. However, Xiao Xian had a feeling that they wouldn't get anything tonight. When the night fell, the others didn't go to sleep, but crowded at the entrance of the cave. Why do I feel that it did work? Tua said, looking at a small protrusion about 10 meters away from the entrance of the cave. I feel it too. Although I can't see clearly, I can see a little farther than before. You're right. This is just a seedling. If it eats a big one, will it be able to move freely in the dark? Even Ta couldn't move freely in the dark. His vision wasn't as good as those ferocious beasts, so his movements would be limited. The effect of the green thief seedling made everyone happy, but they wouldn't eat it alone. They would bring the green thief in the stone box back to the tribe and hand it over to the shaman. This made Xiao Xian admire the shaman even more. Even in the face of such great temptation, these people could still stick to their principles. This was the result of the shaman's training. It was a very quiet night. Everyone was having sweet dreams, and the night watchers were paying attention to the movements under the tree, hoping to catch more green thieves. Xiao Xian slept well that night. But he did not have any dreams. He did not dream of the flowing green. The next day, before the sun completely rose, everyone rushed down the tree to see Xiaoxian's trap. Other people who knew a little about setting traps also set some traps. However, they were disappointed today. Nothing was put on. The ground, which was covered with red liquid yesterday, was now covered with green. The knee-high grass grew up overnight. The blood of the fire spear became their nutrients. Chapter 84. Bitter sandroot, living blood leaf, seven-forked palm, blood thread flower. Ta and Tua were counting the results of the hunting over the past few days, while Xiaoxian was counting the days. The hunting time was up and it was time for them to go back. In the past few days after they got the green thief, the hunting group would set a few traps every night, but the results were minimal, and they didn't find anything useful. They were just lucky that night. In the past few days, Xiaoxian had been following them everywhere. Although he couldn't help much with his fighting ability, he didn't need to worry about the others. Xiaoxian could take care of himself, which was the biggest help for the others. Xiaoxian had learned a lot of wonderful things in the past few days. Once, in order to find the seven-forked palm, he almost fought against the rippers. When the seven-forked palm sensed danger, it would close its thick bark-like leaves, wrapping the core of its body into a solid object like a pine tower, and at the same time secreting a kind of liquid that could attract the rippers. If the hunting group hadn't acted fast enough, they would have been surrounded by a large group of rippers, who had followed the smell. On the other side, Tua had finished counting. Compared to the last hunting, we have 2 less. But this time we found the wind ball and the green thief, so our achievements are much better than before. Tua said with a smile. Ta also showed a relaxed look, because this time they did get more than before. We'll count again when we meet up with Wei and the others. Maybe they have found the other 2. Wei was a senior totem warrior about the same age as Ta. He led the other 20 warriors to separate from Ta and the others. Ta said to the others, "Let's take a rest today, and get ready to go back tomorrow." "Yes, boss." The others answered. They couldn't wait to go back, and they were looking forward to sharing their experience with their peers or seniors in the other advance group. Xiaoxian was also looking forward to going back, but not for the green thief, but for the bird eggs in his animal skin bag. The other members of the advance group were not interested in the bird eggs either. Kiki had used the remaining bird eggs as bait when they encountered the ripper. The ripper also ate bird eggs. Xiaoxian threw them away too. However, there were still some eggs left in the tree hole and he didn't bring them with him. Now they were no longer in the tree hole but in another place. In order to find their target, their resting place had been constantly changing. One night they even slept in the leaves, using the leaves to roll themselves into a cylinder, and slept for the whole night. That night, around the plant that looked like a ham, the layers of leaves wrapped around it should have been upright, but there were 21 leaves that were rolled up into cylinders and hung there. There was a person sleeping in each cylinder. Tua said that the plant had the function of repelling insects. It was also one of the objects they wanted to collect. When they had no place to sleep, they would use the big leaves of the plant to wrap themselves up so that they would not be attacked by the insects that came out at night. However, he couldn't do it during the day. During the day, the leaves of the plant became very hard and couldn't be rolled up at all. For Xiaoxian, this was a very novel experience. As for the bird eggs in the animal skin bag, he wanted to take them out to try. Most of the plants would wither away after leaving this place, but what about the bird eggs? The plants here were very unusual, and so were the insects that ate the plants here. Furthermore, could it be speculated that the birds that ate the fruits and insects here had more nutritional value or medicinal effect than the birds from other places? So did the bird eggs. The shelf life of a raw egg was longer than that of a boiled egg. Xiaoxian didn't know if this was the case for these strange-looking bird eggs, so he didn't cook them. The next day, Ta led the group back, and met up with the other 20 people at the agreed place. Some of them were injured, but fortunately they weren't seriously injured. After hearing about the green thief, the other 20 people stared at the stone box wrapped in leaves. They couldn't wait to open it and take a look, but they also knew that it was not the right time. When they came here, they used the big dragonflies to glide down from the mountain, and when they returned, they also needed to borrow the dragonflies. When the sun was about to set, the people in the advance group waited in one place. Some of them climbed up the tall plants to check the location of the army of dragonflies. After all, they didn't always take the same route on their return journey. Over there. Let's go. Hurry up. If we're too slow, we won't be able to catch up. We have to wait until tomorrow. Xiaoxian didn't need to carry the boxes with the plants. He only carried the animal skin bag, which was much lighter than the others. At this time, in order to catch up with the army of dragonflies, everyone was running in that direction in a hurry. Xiaoxian suddenly felt like he was rushing to catch a bus in his previous life. Tut! He quickly climbed up the tall plants and tied a rope in his hand. When the army of dragonflies flew by, he threw the rope out and tied it around their feet. After he was pulled up, if there were still dragonflies flying in the air, he would jump onto the backs of the dragonflies below. The rope was too long, and if he hung in the air, he would be easily swept by the wings of the dragonflies. When they were about to reach the mountain, the dragonflies began to flap their wings and fly higher. The ground was getting farther and farther away, and the objects below were getting smaller and smaller. Behind them on the green land, the tall plants closed their leaves, and the blooming flowers closed their petals. All kinds of sounds announced that the evening was coming. Be careful when you jump. Don't get hit. Ta shouted to Xiaoxian. Got it. The moment the dragonflies flew up the cliff, Xiaoxian quickly ran towards the tail of the dragonflies. He found a gap and jumped down. He inserted his stone knife into the mountain wall, and slowly slid down the mountain wall until he stood firmly on a flat ground. Move! Move! Bang! The dragonfly that Kiki was sitting on flew a little too high. When he jumped over, he hit the mountain wall and rolled a few times before he landed. Although he hit the wall, Kiki still protected the box with the herbs in his arms. When he stood up, he rubbed his back and grimaced in pain. After everyone jumped down, the army of dragonflies also climbed over the mountain and went to the pond where they rested. Let's go. Have a good rest. We'll be busy in the next few days, Ta said. However, they were too excited to talk about the green thief that night, so they didn't sleep for long. After leaving the mountain the next day, Xiaoxian realized what Tua and the others meant when they said, "There are many things here that we can't take away." The green land could no longer be seen, and the fragrant big leaves that wrapped the green thief's stone box were withering, turning yellow and falling to the ground. The mud wrapped around the stone box couldn't completely cover the smell of the green thief. What made everyone depressed was that many ferocious beasts seemed to be very interested in the green thief. Originally, everyone in the advance group wanted to give Xiaoxian some advice and help him hunt some food on the way back. However, they were so busy that they couldn't even talk to each other. In order to protect the green thief, everyone in the advance group fought all the way. In order to get back as soon as possible, they didn't bring any prey. The longer they stayed, the more difficult it would be for them. At first, they killed all the ferocious beasts that came to them one by one, two by two, and one by one. Robbing the green thief? No way. Die, die, die. But gradually everyone's strategy changed. What? More ferocious beasts coming for the green thief. How many? Run. Run. Everyone in the advance group had never been so embarrassed. In the past, they could bring back some prey or some souvenirs from the ferocious beasts on their way back. But this time they didn't have the time and they didn't have the mood. Everyone had a strong smell of blood on them, and it was the blood of high-level ferocious beasts. They didn't have time to wipe the blood off their faces. Their hair was messy and they looked even worse than the kids in the cave. Blood clots had already formed on their animal skins, and when they dried them, they could easily rub them off. Even at night they were attacked from time to time. It was unbearable. They didn't get enough sleep and they were tired all the way back. They had to fight and kill along the way. Luckily, the average strength of the advance group was strong. If it were any other hunting group, they would have lost some members here. Therefore, Xiaoxian, who could still be energetic after a nap, became an outlier among them. The others looked at Xiaoxian with a gloomy look. Xiaoxian looked at the animal skin bag. The bird eggs were still in good condition. He had put some dry leaves and hay in the bag. Since he left, only one of the eggs had been broken. According to the rules of the hunting group, except for the target, everything they got belonged to them. Therefore, no one would say anything about the bird eggs that Xiaoxian had. They weren't interested in the eggs anyway. When they were looking for the target, they had eaten a lot of bird eggs and all kinds of fruits. They hadn't eaten roasted meat for many days, so naturally, they wouldn't eat bird eggs anymore. But when they bit into the meat, they chewed it like it was their enemy. They chewed loudly, probably cursing those ferocious beasts in their dreams. Chapter 85. When the hunting groups arrived at the meeting time, the advance group would usually arrive first. They needed to pack the herbs they brought back in new wooden boxes. Because of the green thief, the advance group was in a hurry, so they arrived one day earlier. When the 40 or so warriors of the advance group finally arrived at the meeting point, exhausted, they did not have much time to rest. After cutting wood, they built a big wooden box as big as a carriage, and put all the herbs they brought back inside. Then the wooden box was sealed, tied with vines and covered with leaves of other plants. In short, no one could see what was inside and no insects or other things could get in. After packing the herbs, the advance group was divided into two groups. One group stayed to look after the herbs, and the other went hunting. They took turns. After all, they had to bring back some game, or else what would they eat when they returned to the tribe empty-handed? Besides, they had to bring more things with them on the path of glory, so as not to lose face. There were not too many high-level ferocious beasts around the meeting point, so the advance group was not worried that the place where they stored the herbs would be dangerous. Besides, it was close to the top of the mountain, so there were fewer animals. Xiao Xian went hunting with the first group. Ta saw that he was in good spirits, so he nodded and agreed. The ferocious beasts around were not too strong. If anything happened, the warriors in the advance group could protect Xiao Xian. One day later, the other hunting groups also arrived at the meeting point one after another. Mai's group was the second of the 5 to arrive. Seeing that they had a good hunting result this time, the warriors looked relaxed. Xian, the advance group is good, isn't it? You look quite energetic. Lang Jie patted Xiao Xian's shoulder with a smile. However, when he looked at the other warriors in the advance group, he could not say anything more. Not only Lang Jie, but the other hunting groups also guessed that the advance group might have encountered some great disaster when they arrived at the meeting point and saw the condition of the warriors in the advance group. After several days of continuous traveling and fighting, they were busy packing the animals when they arrived at the gathering point. Then they had to go down the mountain to hunt again. In order to maintain the reputation and status of the advance group, the hunting animals they chose were not low-level animals. They were busy all the way until the evening. The 40 of them split into two groups and took turns going down the mountain to hunt. They only rested for one night. However, one night was not enough for them to recover from their exhaustion and lack of energy. Their mental state was still not good. Even after a simple grooming, it could not change their sorry state. When had the advance group ever been in such a sorry state? Everyone had their own guesses. At the very least, they had never seen the advance group in such a state since they started hunting with the team. It was as if they had been brutally ravaged and tortured to such a state. As for the reason, everyone couldn't help but compare the difference between this time and the previous hunting teams. The only difference was the addition of Xiao Xian. The kids, who were still immersed in the joy of their first hunting experience and exchanging experiences with their awakened companions, were now whispering to each other and pointing at Xiao Xian. The advance group is so tired to protect Xian, but Xian is totally fine. That's right. He's a burden, isn't he? Even if he was lucky enough to be protected by the ancestors last time, he might not be so lucky every time. Anyway, it's good enough that he came back safely. Anyway, it looks like the advance group won't take him with them next time. Alas, it's better for him to stay in the hunting group like us. How old is he? He's not strong at all. He's just a junior totem warrior like us. How dare he dream of staying with the advance group? Not only these kids but the others in the hunting group also had the same idea. Everyone in the advance group was so tired that they couldn't hide the exhaustion on their faces. It was just like how they were even more tired to protect the new warriors in this hunting mission. It must be because of Xiao Xian. The place the advance group went to was naturally more dangerous, and any small factor could lead to different results. Xiao Xian was the unstable factor in this advance group. I told you that Xian shouldn't be with them, someone said in a low voice. It must be because of protecting that kid that the advance group is so tired. Otherwise, why didn't we see them like this before? It seems that the advance group has suffered a great loss this time. Alas, being tortured like this. Even the prey has been reduced a lot. I don't think my son is any worse than Xian. Who knows when my son will be recruited? Maybe someone in the advance group like Xian. Seeing that Xian's prey was good last time, he wants to marry his daughter to him. That's why he specially recruited Xian this time. Nonsense, the team leader doesn't have a daughter. But the others do. Hey, do you think the advance group is thinking about how to beat Xian up? Aha, that's possible. Someone said something, and that person and his teammates laughed together. But suddenly their faces froze. Because they found that the 40 people in the advance group were all looking at them, as if they were looking at idiots. If it weren't for the fact that everyone in the advance party was too tired to move, they would have already gone over to beat him up. Xian is nothing. Have you seen the trap that kid set up? Have you seen the kid catch the green thief? Have you seen the kid make 2 fire lances fall to the ground in blood with one move? You don't even know shit. They had laughed at Xiao Xian in the beginning, but they had been slapped in the face within 2 days of entering the Green Land. Loss? If catching the wind ball and the green thief was a loss, they would rather suffer every day. As for the troubles they had encountered along the way, it was needless to say. There was a price to pay for everything. Since they had found the green thief, they had to be mentally prepared to deal with more troubles. They had been aware of this since the first day they joined the advance group. Torture? If they could find more animal skin scrolls and curly-tail herbs, eat the green thief and encounter more magical treasures, they would be willing to suffer such torture again and again. Seeing the expression on the advance group's faces, the leader of the hunting group glared at the warrior who had been joking in his group, warning him to stop talking. Except for the advance group, no one knew that it was Ta who had asked for Xiao Xian, not Xiao Xian. So naturally they had all kinds of guesses. But some of them were smart enough to figure out that there must be some other reasons. But no matter what happened to the advance group, it was not something they could talk about casually. How dare you laugh at others when you don't have the ability? Lang Jie sneered. He looked at the few warriors who had been joking, his eyes full of disdain. Who did you say didn't have the ability? Someone stood up. We can't do anything to the advance group, but we can't do anything to you. What's wrong with that? Lang Jie was not afraid at all. Other warriors in the same hunting group stood up together with Lang Ga. They had a good impression of Xiao Xian. Whether Xiao Xian was protected by his ancestors or for other reasons, they thought that Xiao Xian was a good warrior, and that was enough for them. Seeing that the 2 hunting groups were about to fight, the team leader shouted, "Shut up, all of you." Ta glanced at the 2 groups with a cold face, and said in a deep voice, "Whoever makes noise again, don't follow us next time." The 2 groups immediately became obedient. After all, the team leader still had the quota. When Lang Jie walked back to his group's resting place, he saw Xiao Xian standing at the advance group's area and making a gesture to him. Lang Jie, who had been annoyed a moment ago, was so happy that his teeth almost fell out. Xiao Xian's gesture meant that there would be something good for him when he returned. After the whole group gathered, Ta led them back to the tribe. In the tribe, Old Ku was sitting on a stone in the training ground, with his hand on his crutch. No one knew what he was thinking. Hearing the noise, Old Ku looked up and saw Caesar running back with a stone smeared with grass juice in his mouth. After Xiao Xian left, Old Ku did not stop training Caesar. He followed Xiao Xian's training method. He had to admit that Xiao Xian's method was very useful, and Caesar's training was also very effective. He could find things that he had thrown away. To reward Caesar, Old Ku threw him a piece of meat. When he was about to say something, he saw some people rushing back to the tribe at the foot of the mountain. He also heard that the hunting group was coming back. Counting the days, the hunting group would be back in a few days. Old Ku could not sit still. After Caesar finished eating the meat, he sat on Caesar's back and gently knocked on Caesar's head. "Go back, Xian is coming back." Caesar was reluctant at first, but as soon as he heard Xiao Xian's name, he ran away immediately. Old Ku asked him to slow down, but he did not listen. The wounded had been sent back to the tribe in advance. When Old Ku returned to the tribe, there were already many people standing on both sides of the path of glory, waiting with their necks stretched. Finally, a group of people appeared in the distance. The people standing at the foot of the mountain blew the whistle to pass the message to the people waiting on the mountain. When the hunting group set foot on the path of glory, the people who had been waiting on both sides of the road for a long time were excited. This time, some of the children of some families were participating in the hunt for the first time. So those who had not gone out to hunt were all waiting below. Seeing that Xiaoxian was safe and sound, Old Ku was relieved. However, when he glanced at the people in the advance group, his heart skipped a beat. With his eyesight, he could naturally see that the people in the advance group were not in good condition. Thinking of what Xiaoxian said before leaving, "Don't worry," Old Ku touched his old heart in his chest. He felt that his heartbeat would not slow down no matter how hard he tried. He always felt that every time he heard this kid say, "Don't worry," something big would happen. Transition chapter. Tonight's chapter will be updated. Go to bed early. Continue on the weekend. Chapter 86. Back in the tribe after the sword cleansing ceremony, everyone in the hunting group went down the mountain. The Xiaoxian didn't have much game, so he went down the mountain with the game by himself. This time the shaman didn't ask the Xiaoxian to stay for a chat, because all his attention was on the green thief brought back by the advance group. He didn't have time to pay attention to other things. But after the sword cleansing ceremony, the shaman told the Xiaoxian that he would find him again in a few days, and that he would send someone to pass on the message. The advance group didn't bring back as many ferocious beasts as before, and the quality of the ferocious beasts was also not as good as before. But this time they made the biggest contribution. The green thief couldn't be told directly. Only a few people in the tribe knew about it, and those who knew about it were those who had a high position in the tribe, or those who had made great contributions. Most of the ordinary people didn't know about it. The only thing they knew was that the advance group had made great contributions this time. Most of the ordinary people in the tribe didn't care about what the advance group had done. They cared more about their own family members who had participated in the hunt. As for other people, it was just a topic they talked about. Even if many people were curious about the performance of the advance group, they would forget about it after they went back to the tribe and busy themselves with the game. Xiaoxian dragged the game back home, put it down, and ran to Old Ku's place. He also brought back some fresh meat and some bird eggs. When they went down the mountain, Xiaoxian gave Mai Langjie and the others some bird eggs. He had eaten a lot of bird eggs in the Greenland, so he brought them back for them to see if there was any difference between the bird eggs in the Greenland and those in other places, and if they could be used as medicine eggs. In Old Ku's house, Xiaoxian briefly told him about the harvest this time. Of course, he couldn't tell him about some things that needed to be kept secret. He only emphasized the white hair used to set traps. That kind of white hair is very suitable for setting traps after it is connected into a thread. It's a pity that it can't be kept for long. I originally wanted to bring some back for you to see, but I ran into some trouble midway and used up all the traps. The broken thread began to deteriorate after a few days. It lost its elasticity and broke with the pull. When we came back, it had already degraded. Although some of the words Xiaoxian used were unfamiliar to Old Ku, he could guess the meaning of these words and understand what Xiaoxian was talking about. "What a pity," Old Ku said. The materials were hard to find, which was one of the main reasons why this skill was gradually lost. "It would be great if we could find a way to bring them back in one piece," Xiaoxian said. Old Ku shook his head. "I won't force you." Old Ku's greatest wish was to pass on his skills to the right person. Now that he had found Xiaoxian, he had no regrets. Moreover, Xiaoxian could follow the advance group and come back safely. It was both luck and strength. "What are these eggs?" Old Ku looked at the eggs that Xiaoxian threw into the pot and asked. "I brought them back from the other side. The people in the advance group often eat them, so I brought some back." Hearing Xiaoxian's words, Old Ku didn't ask any more questions. Since Xiaoxian said that the advance group often ate them, they should be good stuff. Xiaoxian kept 3 bird eggs and gave the rest to Old Ku. After having dinner at Old Ku's place in the afternoon, Xiaoxian took Caesar back home. Before the sun set, Xiaoxian planned to process the animal meat that he brought back. He set up a stone pot in the house and lit the fire. Xiaoxian put the 3 remaining bird eggs into the pot. He planned to cut them up and take them back to the cave after cooking them. After throwing the eggs into the pot of water, Xiaoxian left it alone and processed the animal meat outside the house. Otherwise, the night swallow would come out and cause trouble when it got dark. Caesar was lying in front of the wooden house, holding a bone and playing with it. Suddenly, his ears twitched. He turned his head and looked at the stone pot in the house. After listening carefully, he got up and ran to the pot to look inside. There were 3 bird eggs in the pot. They were as big as Xiaoxian's fist. However, they weren't the biggest or the smallest among the eggs that Xiaoxian brought back. They didn't have so many patterns, but the color of the eggs was different. Xiaoxian took the chopped meat and put it into the stone pot to marinate. He turned his head and saw Caesar staring at the stone pot. "What are you looking at?" Xiaoxian walked over and glanced at the stone pot. At a glance, he saw that one of the eggs had a crack on it, and the egg was still shaking. "Damn it!" Xiaoxian directly put his hand into the stone pot and fished out the broken egg. He held it in his hand and looked at it. Just now the eggshell was only cracked. Xiaoxian fished it out in time so it didn't get wet. The crack on the egg was getting bigger and bigger, and cha-cha sounds came from inside. Obviously, the bird in the egg was about to come out. Looking back at the stone pot, Xiaoxian scooped out the other 2 eggs from the pot with his free hand. Fortunately, the stone pot had just been set up and the temperature of the water hadn't risen yet. Otherwise, the bird that was about to break out of its shell would have been cooked directly. This had never happened to any of the bird eggs that he brought back. Even after eating so many bird eggs, none of them had taken shape. When he fished out the bird eggs, Xiaoxian followed Keek's instructions and took those eggs that looked like they had just been stolen. Normally, there wouldn't be any formed birds in them. This was Keek's experience. It wasn't that Kiki was overflowing with sympathy. It was just that it was difficult to light a fire in the green space. If there were formed birds in the eggs, he didn't like to eat them raw, and it was inconvenient to cook them. That was all. The eggs that had just been stolen were generally clean, while the eggs that had been left for a long time would have stains or other marks on them. The birds that stole the eggs didn't pay much attention to hygiene. The nests weren't exquisitely made and were very simple. The bird feces from the nests above could even fall into the nests below. Therefore, when Xiaoxian was selecting eggs, he chose the cleanest ones and didn't shake them one by one. Besides, there was no need to pay too much attention to whether the bird in the egg had taken shape or not. As Kiki said, if you didn't want to eat it, you could just throw it away. Before this, Xiaoxian hadn't encountered any eggs with formed chicks. He didn't expect that there would be one now. Xiaoxian's hands, which had just skinned the animal, were still stained with blood. The crack on the egg in his palm was getting bigger and bigger, and the sound of cha-cha was getting clearer and clearer. Xiaoxian could clearly feel the movement of the egg through his palm. Looking at the egg, he thought that if this bird could survive, he would raise it as a chicken. He just didn't know if it could lay eggs like a chicken. It didn't matter if it couldn't lay eggs. He could raise it until the end of the year and kill it to eat. The broken eggshell was pushed out, and the chicks inside gradually revealed themselves. It didn't look like the chicks that Xiaoxian had seen before. This bird was wet and had no hair, and its eyes were closed. Chicks were divided into early and late adult birds. Early adult birds could open their eyes as soon as they came out of the shell. Like chicks, they were fluffy and could stand, walk, and eat independently. Late adult birds couldn't open their eyes after they came out of the shell. They didn't have much hair, and had to stay in the nest and be fed by their parents. The one in Xiaoxian's hand was obviously a late adult bird. Xiaoxian observed the little chick's beak in his hand. From the shape of its beak, he could tell that it ate meat. Probably because the smell of blood on Xiaoxian's hand had stimulated the chick. It opened its beak wide and even pecked at Xiaoxian's hand. Probably thought that it was food, but it couldn't swallow it. Xiaoxian looked around. He took out an old piece of animal skin and placed it on the stone table. He placed the little chick in his hand on top of it. Then he took out a piece of unmarinated animal meat, cut a small piece, and tore it into smaller pieces. He used 2 thin wooden sticks to pick up the meat and put it into the chick's open beak. The meat he cut was the weakest among all the prey that Xiaoxian had hunted, but it wasn't weak by much. Xiaoxian didn't know if the chick could withstand the energy in the meat. Unexpectedly, the little chick swallowed it directly. Then it opened its beak wide and continued to make cha-cha sounds. There didn't seem to be any problems. Xiaoxian continued to feed it a few more times before it closed its beak. After eating, it went to sleep. Looking at the quiet little chick nesting on the animal's skin, Xiaoxian shook the 2 eggs that he had fished out to listen for sounds. Then he threw them into the stone pot to continue cooking. As for the little chick that had just hatched, Xiaoxian shook his head. It was almost cooked. Fortunately, it had hatched before it was cooked. Chapter 87. Xiaoxian didn't know what the bird would look like when it grew up, what its habits would be, and what its flying ability would be. Maybe it would be similar to a chicken or maybe a bird of prey. If it was the former, it could only be used as food. If it was the latter, he could train it to be used as a falcon. Even if it couldn't hunt, it could be used as an early warning. Of course, it was too early to say. Xiaoxian didn't know the potential of this bird. If it didn't have any reason to exist, Xiaoxian didn't need to do anything. The others would kill it. After all, it wasn't Caesar. When Caesar was still young, he was marked by the shaman. Even if he didn't have the wolf nature, no one dared to have any ideas about him in the tribe. There was an ice cave in the tribe near the top of the mountain. Many people stored food that wasn't pickled there, but they had to hand over a part of it as a reward. Xiaoxian also put some meat in the ice cave. He couldn't pickle all the meat he brought back every time. Caesar didn't like pickled meat, and Old Ku often ate that kind of meat. It wasn't good to eat it for a long time. Not to mention now there was another bird. He couldn't feed them all pickled meat, right? It's so troublesome. Xiaoxian sighed. He could directly throw the little chick away, or give it to Caesar as food, but he always felt that he should try to raise it. 3 days later, the little chick opened its eyes. This was much earlier than Xiaoxian expected. He originally thought that the bird would be like many birds he had seen in his previous life, and that it would take at least 7 to 10 days to open its eyes. He didn't expect that it would only open its eyes after 3 days. It also had more feathers on its body, but it still couldn't walk. When it was hungry, it would cha-cha, open its mouth wide, as if it was afraid that people couldn't see or hear it. During these 3 days, Xiaoxian was at home making stoneware. Xiaoxian now had some basic tools so he could finish most of the stoneware at home. Old Ku would occasionally come over to take a look. He asked Xiaoxian to rest for a few days and craft some stoneware. When he had enough, he would go to the training ground to train. Xiaoxian only needed 1 night of sleep to fully recover. In the past 3 days, he had polished a lot of stone tools. Some were used to set traps, some were used for training, and he had also polished a batch of better tools for the next hunt. He had already decided to follow Mai and the others on their next hunt. Xian! Someone shouted from outside. The 2 men who came over were Tu and Jieba, who were currently in charge of the affairs in the cave. They carried 4 fishes over to Xiaoxian. Since Xiaoxian often brought gifts to the kids in the orphanage, the kids in the orphanage would often bring some fish they caught that day to Xiaoxian. Many people never went back after they left the orphanage. For example, Ku, who was in charge of the orphanage before Xiaoxian, never went back. However, the other kids who awakened at the same time as Xiaoxian did go back a few times. Whether they wanted to go back to show off their hunting results or for other reasons, at least they did not directly cut off contact with the kids in the orphanage. Of course, this was all because Xiaoxian brought a series of changes to the kids' lives after he took over the management of the orphanage in the orphanage. No matter what happened to the other kids after they left the orphanage, Xiaoxian would always bring some food to the kids in the orphanage every time he came back from a hunt. After all, he had enough food for himself, so it was not a big deal to share some with the kids. The kids in the orphanage were also grateful to Xiaoxian. Because of Xiaoxian, their lives had changed a lot and they were now much healthier. Xiaoxian did not refuse their kindness. It was rare for the 2 of them to bring the fish over. Although the fish could not provide much energy for Xiaoxian now, it could still improve his appetite. Every time Jieba and Tu came over, their eyes were filled with envy. It was really good to become a totem warrior. They could have their own cabin, hunt for more food and grow faster. Xiaoxian was not as tall as them in the orphanage, but it had not been long since he awakened, and he was already taller than Jieba, who was the biggest kid in the orphanage. Don't be jealous. Maybe it will be your turn next year. Xiaoxian carried a small piece of marinated animal meat to them. As usual, everyone in the orphanage can only eat a little bit. Don't eat too much or you will die. Every time Xiaoxian gave them the meat of the lowest level, They could not bear the meat of the higher level, and there was not much of it. If there was too much meat, they would not be able to absorb it. In the past, Mai and Lang Jie also gave Xiaoxian some lower-level meat jerky. As for the meat jerky of the four-fanged wild boar or the thorn black wind, the kids in the orphanage could not even touch it. In the past, Xiaoxian did not know about this. But after he learned about the relationship between the two, he strictly controlled the meat and the amount of meat he sent to the orphanage. After Jieba and two left, Xiaoxian carried a fish over. After killing it, he tore off some meat and put it in front of the little chick. The little chick opened its beak wide just now, but after the meat was put in front of it, it closed its beak tightly. Now it was the animal meat, and it continued to open its beak and swallow. "You are so fucking picky," Xiaoxian cursed. Holding the fish, Xiaoxian looked at Caesar, who was lying on the side. Looking at Xiaoxian's eyes and then looking at the fish in Xiaoxian's hands, Caesar turned its head to one side, refusing to look at Xiaoxian or the fish in Xiaoxian's hands. "Fuck, you are all picky." Originally, he wanted to feed the little chick with the fish, but now it seemed that the fish was disliked by the two of them. On the 7th day, Xiaoxian had almost finished preparing the tools. He planned to go to the training ground with old Ku. After thinking for a while, Xiaoxian decided to take the little chick with him. Otherwise, who knew what the little chick would do? The little chick grew very quickly, changing its appearance every day. Xiaoxian guessed that it was because this place was special, so the birds grew quickly. Its vitality was also tenacious. Xiaoxian had no experience in raising birds, so he wasn't that careful, but the chick grew healthily. It just ate a lot every day, and not long after it slept it would start chirping cha-cha. Now, the little chick often didn't stay in its nest. If Xiaoxian wasn't paying attention, it would jump out of the grass nest that Xiaoxian made for it, then crawl around the table. If it found Caesar lying beside the table, it would immediately roll down and land on the wolf's back. Caesar was so angry that he bared his teeth. There were a few times when he almost died under the wolf's claws. Fortunately, Caesar was obedient. He knew that Xiaoxian didn't want him to hurt the chick, so he endured it. Otherwise, he would have already eaten it as a snack. Xiaoxian felt that not only was the chick tenacious, but it was also very bold. After only a few days, it dared to directly peck Caesar's wolf nose. Although it was still a chick, its pecking strength was quite strong. Xiaoxian already had many pecking marks on the wooden stick that he used to pick meat for it. It wasn't afraid when it landed on the wolf's back. It continued to peck, and a few of Caesar's wolf fur were plucked. He didn't know if it was really bold, or if there was something wrong with its brain. It was sent flying by Caesar's kick a few times, but nothing happened. It would continue to cause trouble next time. The little chick was too noisy. It chirped cha-cha all day long. Xiaoxian directly named it Cha-Cha. On the 10th day, the brown fur on Cha-Cha's body grew denser and thicker. Could even stand up and walk, but if it walked too fast it would fall to the ground. It wasn't very stable. Xiaoxian did what he did a few days ago. He took Cha-Cha and Caesar to find old Ku first. Then they went to the training ground together. When Xiaoxian was training, old Ku watched from a distance. Cha-Cha also watched. The old man recently especially liked to play with the chick with a stone worm. Cha-Cha didn't eat stone worms, but it liked to peck at them for fun. Old Ku used a branch to hold a stone worm and shook it in front of it. Cha-Cha would stretch its neck and lift its weak wings a little. It would enter battle mode and then rush up to peck. Not long after, the stone worm held by old Ku was pecked to pieces. Xiaoxian came to take a rest after breaking a round of trap bombing. When he saw the peck stone worm held by old Ku, he smiled and said, "It's too aggressive. I guess it's a fighter jet. It wants to fight everything it sees." But it was good to be fierce. It wouldn't starve to death immediately if it flew out, unless it wanted to die. Fighting chicken? Old Ku was stunned. Then he smiled and said, "That's a good name. In the future, it will be more powerful than those chickens with beautiful tails in the mountains." Xiaoxian recalled the pheasants that were like ostriches in the mountains. If Cha-Cha grew as big as those pheasants in the mountains and attacked people, it would be impossible to keep it in the tribe. They would either kill it or throw it far away. The tribe wouldn't allow such a creature to exist. No matter if it looked like a chicken or an eagle in the future, it should be trained well. When he went back in the afternoon, Xiaoxian met Tua, who was on duty in the patrol team. Just in time. I was going to send a message to you. I didn't expect to see you here. Tua said. The shaman wants you to go up the mountain tomorrow. Got it. I'll go up the mountain tomorrow. There's something good. Tua whispered and gave Xiaoxian a look. The so-called something good was probably about the green thief. Xiaoxian understood. He thanked Tua and left. On his way back, Xiaoxian opened the animal skin bag and looked at the bird that seemed to be dozing. He wondered if he should take it up the mountain tomorrow. Chapter 88. The next day, Xiaoxian directly went up the mountain with the animal skin bag. It was always good to tell the shaman when he raised a bird. Cha-Cha was in the animal skin bag. It had been put in the animal skin bag so many times that it was used to it and didn't cry out all the time. The people on the mountain were very familiar with Xiaoxian. Every time they saw Xiaoxian, someone would take the initiative to greet him. Xiaoxian would respond with a smile, no matter if they were from the Ta or the other camp. You're here. The shaman had been waiting in the stone house for a long time. When he saw Xiaoxian, the smile on his face deepened, and more wrinkles appeared on his old face. However, not everyone could be treated like this by the shaman. Not to mention, Xiaoxian was still young, and he was almost the only one among the younger generation in the tribe who could be treated like this by the shaman. Without saying anything, Xiaoxian directly walked in and sat on the straw mat. Cha-cha. When Xiaoxian sat down, Cha-Cha, who was in the animal skin bag, made a sound. Probably because he was aware of the unfamiliar surroundings, and the animal skin bag was next to the straw mat, he made a sound of uneasiness. When Xiaoxian entered the house, the shaman glanced at the animal skin bag. Now that he heard the sound, the smile on his face turned into doubt. Xiaoxian reached out and took out Cha-Cha from the bag. Compared to 10 days ago when it was just hatched, now Xiaoxian couldn't even wrap it with one hand. This is... The shaman stared at the baby bird in Xiaoxian's hand. It's an egg I brought back last time. Xiaoxian told the shaman the whole story, so I want to try taming it. The so-called trained Caesar trained Cha-Cha. The shaman was speechless. Seeing that the shaman was still a little confused, Xiaoxian hurriedly said, No, I mean a trained dog and a trained falcon. Old Ku said that Cha-Cha may be an aggressive bird, so I want to try training it. When the time comes to hunt, it can help. Even if I can't bring it with me to hunt, it can be used as an aerial observer in the tribe. The shaman lowered his eyelids, but his expression did not change much. He asked calmly, What if I fail? Kill him. Xiaoxian didn't hesitate. This was the rule here. If you don't listen, you'll either die or be thrown away. Generally speaking, the way people in the tribe acted was more like the former. They were straightforward, neat, and not indecisive. They didn't have such meticulous emotions at all, and acted more violently and wildly. Very good. The shaman smiled again. This time, his smile was even deeper than when Xiaoxian entered the room. He seemed to be in a good mood. Lift it up and let me see, the witch said. Xiaoxian held the bird in his hand in front of the shaman, so that the shaman could have a better look at it. His other hand was to prevent the bird from pecking at him. The person in front of him was one of the two people with the highest status in the tribe, even slightly higher than the chief. He couldn't let it offend anyone. If it really pecked the shaman, the people in the tribe wouldn't allow it to stay. However, to Xiaoxian's surprise, Cha-Cha was very obedient today. It didn't make any noise after it came in, and it didn't seem to want to peck at anyone now. The shaman quietly looked at the young bird with a circle of fluffy feathers, and Cha-Cha quietly looked at the person in front of it. After a while, the shaman raised his bark-like hand and took a palm-sized stone plate from the short table next to him. There was some black powder in the stone plate. He dipped his index finger and middle finger in the black powder with his other hand. His thumb rubbed the black powder on the index finger and middle finger, and then bent the other 4 fingers except for the thumb, and raised his hand in front of Cha-Cha. The thumb dipped in black powder touched Cha-Cha's head. His finger touched Cha-Cha's brown and gray feathers were immediately stained with black powder. However, Cha-Cha didn't avoid it. It still stared at the shaman and was very obedient. Xiaoxian was very surprised. This bird had never been so obedient since it came out of its shell. No matter what the shaman meant, Xiaoxian knew that the shaman allowed Xiaoxian to try taming it in the tribe. Moreover, after the shaman's blessing, even if Cha-Cha didn't live well in the tribe, no one would kill it. Even if they chose to throw it far away, no one would dare to kill it. After the shaman put down the stone plate, he didn't stop there. Instead, he took out a patterned plate, the same patterned plate that Caesar had, and handed it to Xiaoxian. Obviously, this was for Cha-Cha. It was even more important than Caesar. This was a double guarantee. Xiaoxian didn't understand why the shaman valued this bird so much. It was just a bird with an unknown future that could be used as a food reserve. Could it be that the shaman could predict the future and see Cha-Cha's potential? Unfortunately, when the shaman pretended to be mysterious, no one could pry information out of him, and no one dared to. Although he looked like he was about to die, he always made people feel reverence. Throwing Cha-Cha back into the animal skin bag, Xiaoxian bowed to the shaman to show his gratitude. With the shaman's approval, it would be much more convenient to bring Cha-Cha around the tribe in the future. After the Cha-Cha's matter was settled, the shaman went straight to the point. He asked about Xiaoxian's hunting in the Green Land. Xiaoxian told him selectively, but this time he said a little more, and mentioned that he vaguely saw the shadow of the green thief. Xiaoxian didn't think that he could hide it from the shaman for the rest of his life. He would stay in the tribe for a long time, maybe for the rest of his life, and he had no one to rely on. Because of Ta, Xiaoxian wouldn't put his hope on the chief. Besides, if Ta really became the next chief, what would he do if he wanted to make things difficult for him? It wasn't that Xiaoxian had a dark mind, but after this hunting trip, he felt that he wouldn't get along well with Ta. There were no human rights in the tribe, and everything could be decided by the higher-ups. If the higher-ups said you were wrong, and they wouldn't give you any chance to explain. After these days of observation, Xiaoxian would rather believe in the shaman, the so-called spiritual leader of the tribe. Although the development of this isolated tribe wasn't very good, it wasn't seriously abnormal either. This was all thanks to the efforts of generations of shamans, and he believed that the next shaman wouldn't be bad either. He told the shaman more and more, so that he could gradually make the shaman more confident. After quietly listening to Xiaoxian's story, the shaman didn't ask much, but handed Xiaoxian 2 medicine bags with a kind face. One is for recuperation and the other is mixed with the green thief. Drink both of them as soon as possible, especially the green thief. Don't keep it for too long. After carefully putting the 2 medicine bags away, Xiaoxian heard the shaman ask again, "Who are you going to follow in the next hunting trip?" "I was just about to tell you that I want to follow Uncle Mai and the others in the next hunting trip," Xiaoxian said. After Ta came back, he didn't kick Xiaoxian out of the advance group. Maybe he changed his mind and wanted to continue leading Xiaoxian next time. However, Xiaoxian didn't want to do that. He wanted to follow Uncle Mai and the others so that he could have better opportunities to gain experience. If he followed the advance group, Xiaoxian wouldn't be able to keep up with their pace, and he couldn't solve the problem with a lasso every time. Maybe after hearing Xiaoxian's answer, Ta would think that Xiaoxian didn't know what was good for him, and his impression of Xiaoxian would be even worse. But so what? Xiaoxian didn't want to go in and be a decoration. He didn't want to go through that again. "Okay, I know." The shaman nodded. With the shaman's words, Xiaoxian didn't have to worry about anything else. Ta didn't even dare to say anything in front of the shaman, let alone refute him. Even his father, the chief of the tribe Ao, wouldn't directly refute the shaman's decision. Before leaving, Xiaoxian bowed to the shaman again. The more Xiaoxian learned about the shaman, the more he felt that such an old man was really worthy of respect. It had nothing to do with brainwashing. When going down the mountain, Xiaoxian deliberately went to Mai and Lang Jie and asked them if the bird eggs they ate were the same as Cha-Cha. However, the answer he got was that Cha-Cha was a special case just like other bird eggs. "You hatched an egg?" Lang Jie said in surprise. Xiaoxian didn't know what to say. He didn't like the sound of that. Lang Jie was surprised. He pulled Xiaoxian's animal skin bag over and opened it to take a look. He even reached his hand in to take out the Cha-Cha to have a closer look. This bird was blessed by the shaman. Lang Ga's hand was pecked hard as soon as he put it in. If it weren't for his thick skin, other people who hadn't awakened their totemic power would definitely bleed. This bird is fierce enough. It's better than Caesar. Obviously, Lang Ga's standard of good was the same as Keek's. For most people in the tribe, no matter if it was a beast or a ferocious beast, the fiercer it was, the better. The fiercer it was, the greater the sense of achievement when slaughtering it. By the way, Xian, when you go back, check your house. The rainy season is coming. Although your house was just built this year, it's better to check it carefully. Prepare more dry wood at home. Rainy season? Xiao Xian thought about what happened last year. Indeed, the rainy season was coming. Chapter 89. It was raining cats and dogs. The raindrops were densely packed, hitting the ground rapidly. The sound of muddy water splashing could be heard everywhere. The leaves rustled as they were hit by the rain, and the sound made people wonder if the raindrops would pierce through the leaves. In the curtain of rain, a figure flashed through the forest. A stone needle as thin as a toothpick pierced through the curtain of rain and pierced through the dense branches at an extremely fast speed. With a tut sound, it pierced into a short wooden stake as thick as an arm hanging there. At this time, there were many similar stone needles piercing the wooden stake from different angles, making it look like a hedgehog. There were many such wooden stakes hanging nearby. Some were in the grass, some were hidden in the bushes, and some were hanging on the trees. Whoosh, after a quick dragging sound, the wooden stakes in different places moved faster. At the same time, more stone needles flew out. Tut tut tut. On the grass, in the bushes, in the air. Everywhere, there were more stone needles on the stumps. The pitter-patter of raindrops hitting the ground did not cause the stone needles to deviate at all. Whoosh! The figure in the rain turned over, jumped over the branches in front of him, and landed steadily. The sound of landing was inaudible in the surrounding raindrops. Xiao Xian wiped his face and went to pick up the wooden stakes. He had been training like this these days. At first he practiced spearhead darts, then he practiced thinner stone thorns, and now he was practicing stone needles that were thinner than stone thorns. He thought of the white hares he encountered in the Greenland hunting ground. They were so soft, but they could pierce through thick planks. Even the body of a mid-level totem warrior could not resist them. One of the reasons was the material of the white hares. Another, more important reason was that the white hares were very fast. This was something that Xiao Xian was trying to do. He hoped that one day he would be able to use a thin blade of grass to pierce through a thick wooden board. But for now he could only practice step by step. If he couldn't even use stone, then he wouldn't be able to use grass. There was still a long way to go. Because it had been raining these days, Xiao Xian did not let old Ku come out. It was a torture to come out in such heavy rain. Every time Gu went to old Ku to get some stone tools, he would mock old Ku for becoming weak. In the past, he used to walk up the mountain step by step with his crutches. He did not ask for help when he went out, but now? Old Ku rode Caesar when he went out and relied on Xiao Xian when he went up the mountain. He did not even go out when it was raining. He was so damn delicate. Old Ku was not annoyed. He did what he was supposed to do and pretended that he did not hear anything. Gu now was filled with jealousy. He would not tell Gu that Xiao Xian had asked for some herbs from the shaman. He was in the recuperation period. In the past he had a negative mentality and did not care whether he lived or died. But now he wanted to live a few more years and see how far Xiao Xian could go. Caesar and Cha-Cha were left at old Ku's place. Xiao Xian sometimes wondered if he should expand the house and let old Ku move in with him. Anyway, he was alone and old Ku was alone. It would save him the trouble of running between the two places every day. While thinking, Xiao Xian was tidying up the wooden stakes and the grass ropes. Last year, the rainy season would start after the next hunting trip. Unfortunately, it was earlier this year. The shaman asked everyone to be prepared, and the hunting team that was going to set off had to postpone their trip. Behind Xiao Xian, a slender worm like a snake slithered out from a tree. Different from a snake, it had many legs. Sticking out its tongue like a snake, it stared at Xiao Xian who was under the tree. Its body slid down the trunk silently, and its slender legs allowed it to stay on the trunk steadily. When it got close to Xiao Xian, it twisted its body and coiled its front half, forming an S shape. Then it aimed at Xiao Xian and opened its mouth to bite the back of Xiao Xian's neck like an arrow released from a bow. Xiao Xian didn't even look behind him. He just casually raised his hand, and when it was only half a palm away from his neck, he had already blocked in front of it and tightly choked its neck. His fingers tightened slightly. Crack! Crack! The worm's head was separated from its body. Xiao Xian flicked his finger and flicked the worm's head to one side of the grass, while the headless worm's body was flung to the other side of the forest when he withdrew his hand. During the whole process, Xiao Xian did not look at the worm at all. After tidying up the stone needles, Xiao Xian stood up and glanced around. He had seen those worms several times in the past 2 days. He heard that they would come out of the ground every year during the rainy season. Not only these worms, but other creatures would also come out of the ground one after another. But except during the rainy season, these worms would almost never appear in the mountains of the training ground. Stepping on the muddy ground, Xiao Xian suddenly lifted his foot and kicked a stone away. The stone that was kicked away was mixed with muddy water, and it shot straight to the grass. A 2-palm-long scorpion-like worm that had just come out of the ground was pierced through by the stone. Old Ku said that the worms that came out of the ground during the rainy season would take the initiative to hurt people, and they were very poisonous. Don't get bitten or stung by them and kill everyone you see. It was said that some worms would run to the tribe, so during the rainy season, the children in the tribe who had not awakened their totemic power were locked up at home. Everyone would sprinkle some kind of grass juice around the house, which had a certain effect of repelling worms. Woo! A loud noise came from the other side of the river. The warriors in the training ground only felt a chill go straight to their heads. They all stopped what they were doing and jumped to a high place to look at the other side of the river. Xiao Xian had almost reached the place where he lived, and there were no hills to hide him. He climbed up a tree and looked at the river in front of the tribe. In the curtain of rain, the figure that jumped out of the river was not clear because it was too far away. But even if the figure was far away from the tribe, and was not completely exposed, one could still guess its huge size. This was the decisive factor that stopped the tribesmen from exploring the river. The river fear beast was the overlord of this boundless river. The word dread that the tribesmen gave it showed how much they feared it. Although the huge dread beast was not clear what it looked like, just by looking at its size and hearing its voice, people already felt an unparalleled sense of oppression. When they appeared, it meant that the real rainy season had begun, and not just an occasional storm. This was just as the witch predicted. The rainy season really came early. When the dread beast jumped up, its roar was like a siren in people's ears, and it was so loud that people felt like their eardrums were about to burst. But when the huge dread beast dived into the water again, it would make a muffled sound like thunder. It was not harsh, but it was even louder than the previous one. It made people feel like their chests were hit by a heavy hammer again and again. If you put a cup of water in the room, you would see the water in the cup shake violently. At this time last year, Xiao Xian, like other kids in the orphan cave, covered their ears and hid in the cave. That kind of sound was torturous for them, and many of them were shivering. Not only the kids in the orphan cave but also the kids in the tribe would hide in their own homes and block their ears with things. But they still could not relieve the uncomfortable feeling caused by the sound. Some of them even bled from their ears and noses. Maybe for those dread beasts, the rainy season was a happy season. They frequently jumped out of the water, as if they were very happy. Even if they were far away from the riverbank, the image they brought was not reduced. For the tribe, the rainy season was a disaster. The only good thing was that the dread beasts would not get close to the bank, let alone go ashore. Otherwise, the tribe might have already ceased to exist. When the huge dread beast appeared, the tribe would hold an emergency meeting. The team leaders of the 2 hunting groups would assign people to go down the mountain to be responsible for the defense. This was also the annual defense battle in the rainy season. During the rainy season, something might come out of the river. That was why the tribe's hunting group delayed going out, because they had to guard against the creatures in the river. It's a new week. Shamelessly asking for a recommendation ticket. Chapter 90. Not long after Xiao Xian returned home, Lang Jie came to inform him about the patrol. Every hunting group was responsible for an area, and they were divided into 3 groups, taking turns to guard the area. Participating in the defense did not necessarily mean that they would encounter danger. It was just a precaution. After all, there were too many unknown factors in the river, and it was always good to be prepared. Mai and the others will start patrolling tonight. You come with me tomorrow morning to replace them. Lang Jie said. Okay, I got it. What do I need to bring? Xiao Xian asked. You don't need to bring too much. Just some handy stoneware will be enough. You only need half a day each time. Lang Jie pointed to a place at the foot of the mountain, over there by the river. It's not far from where you used to fish. You stayed in the cave last year, so you may not know. When the rainy season comes, the river level will rise a lot. It will probably reach there. Lang Jie pointed to Xiaoxian. There was a line made of stones. Below the stone line there was not a single house. Therefore, the people who lived at the bottom of the line would only live near the foot of the mountain, but would not directly build a house at the foot of the mountain. That was why the water level rose during the rainy season. The people who had temporarily camped near the river for fishing had all evacuated. Before the rainy season ended, they would not go near the river again. Thinking that Xiaoxian might not know what would happen during the rainy season, Lang Jie specially told Xiaoxian some things that happened in the past years. When the rain outside became lighter, Lang Jie took Xiaoxian to walk around the area, so that Xiaoxian could be mentally prepared. Although the area they were guarding wouldn't be too difficult, they still had to pay more attention. That is to say, the hunting group will not leave for hunting until the rainy season ends? Xiaoxian asked. He had thought that they would only stay in the tribe for a while, and if there was no trouble they would go hunting. But according to Langa's words, did it mean that they would have to stay in the tribe for the whole rainy season? Then what would people with insufficient food eat? There's nothing we can do about it. That's the rule of the tribe. For example, there are many people on the mountain. They store a lot of food, and the level of their prey is also high so they can survive. But those at the foot of the mountain are in trouble. Even if they store some meat, the level of the meat is not high, so the energy provided is limited. Most of the time they will still be hungry. Lang Jie chuckled. This is much better than winter, because during the rainy season, some things will come out. We can pick them up and eat them. Things. Xiaoxian couldn't help but frown when he thought of the various insects that came out of the training ground. If there was really nothing to eat, he could only start with them. You'll know when the time comes. Lang Jie didn't want to say too much. Anyway, you won't starve to death. Xiaoxian was really curious now. According to Langa's words, it was not the kind of insects that appeared in the training ground, but something else? It's only once a year. Although it may be dangerous, you'll be fine as long as you're careful. Don't worry. Lang Jie clenched his fist and hammered Xiaoxian's shoulder to encourage him. Xiaoxian rubbed his shoulder and looked at the river in the rain. From time to time, river overlords would appear on the river surface in the distance. After observing those river overlords, Xiaoxian had some doubts. Those river overlords seemed to be heading in the same direction, which could be seen from the way they leaped. If it was an individual case, it would be fine. But all the river overlords that appeared on the water surface were all heading in the same direction. There was no exception. Is that the upstream or downstream of the river? Xiaoxian pointed at the direction where the river overlords leaped, and asked Langa, upstream or downstream. I don't know. I've never been there. It's too far. Lang Jie didn't care. For him, there was no difference between upstream and downstream of the river, so he didn't think too much about it. Xiaoxian looked in that direction, thinking about where it was and why those river overlords were heading in that direction. The river was big enough. If it wasn't fresh water, people would think that it was a sea at first glance. A sea? Could it be a river that flowed into the sea? Xiaoxian recalled the 2 hunting expeditions he went out with the hunting team, and speculated about the direction and terrain. He came to a conclusion that those river overlords were probably heading downstream of the river. If this river really flowed into the sea, then why would those river overlords swim towards the sea during the rainy season? Many fish would swim back and forth periodically due to reproduction, food, wintering, and many other factors. This was the so-called migratory characteristic. Then, were these river overlords also carrying out similar migratory behavior? Xiaoxian shook his head. Everything was just a guess. Even if he asked Lang Jie and the others, they wouldn't get the answer because they didn't even know what a sea was. Whether those river overlords were swimming in a direction during the rainy season or not, Xiaoxian couldn't do anything about it now. However, when he went back later, Xiaoxian would record these phenomena in his notebook. Xiaoxian had already sorted out some animal skins suitable for recording things, including the pictures he saw in the cave. Xiaoxian had drawn them out from memory and stored them away. If the animal skins couldn't be kept for too long, he would copy them on stone slabs. Xiaoxian moved his eyes away from those giant beasts in the distance, and looked at the river bank for a while. Suddenly he said, Lang Jie, Do you think it's okay to build some fish fences here? Lang Jie was thinking about how much food they could get this rainy season. But Xiao Xian's words pulled him back to reality. He asked in confusion, fish fences? What's that? It's something made of wooden sticks and nets to catch fish. Xiao Xian roughly described it, and then continued, I'm thinking if we can use these fish fences to make a simple trap. Trap? Lang Ga's eyes suddenly lit up. It's actually very simple. Xiao Xian took out his stone knife and drew on the ground. Lang Jie, who also knew how to set traps, could infer what Xiao Xian meant when he saw what Xiao Xian said and connected it to the drawing on the ground. Patting his head, Lang Jie said regretfully, Why didn't I think of this before? Xiao Xian wanted to make a simple fish fence-style trap. It wasn't difficult, and it didn't require any more sophisticated settings. Like setting a fish fence, it was just a fence made of wood or stone pillars. The fish fences would roll inwards like mosquito coils, but some were round inwards, and some were square inwards. Xiao Xian wanted to see the differences. The only opening of this kind of simple fish fence-style trap was facing the river. Or he could use the fish fences to make a pocket, like the letter omega, omega. Unlike the former, this kind of trap had its back facing the river, so when the tide went down, the fish swimming in would be trapped inside. Unless the fish swimming in were very intelligent, they could generally be trapped. Xiao Xian had tried it in his previous life. However, Xiao Xian had never participated in the tribe's rainy season patrol, so he didn't know if he could add such a setting, so he asked Lang Ga. Yes. No problem at all. Lang Jie looked at the river level that hadn't started to rise yet, and called Xiao Xian, Let's hurry up and find some stones. Before the river level rises, let's set up this trap. Because some things in the river ate wood, they couldn't use wood to set up fish fences. They could only use stones. However, when they didn't pay attention to stones, it was relatively easy to make stone pillars for the fish fences. Therefore, when Mai brought the first group of people to start patrolling, he saw Xiao Xian and Lang Jie working on the riverbank. From the place near the river to the stone line set up by the tribe, there were fish fences at a certain distance. Because they were in a hurry and didn't pay attention to aesthetics, the stone pillars weren't uniform in thickness. Some of them were even as thick as a person's thigh, and people could stand steadily on them. Chapter 91. What are you doing? Is this a trap? Mai came over and asked. When the river rises, we can stand on it. The person standing next to Mai laughed. They didn't know why Xiao Xian and Lang Jie were doing this, but they all knew that Lang Jie was interested in setting traps. Although most of the time he only set traps like ground bows, he would also set some other traps. Lang Jie told the others about his and Xiao Xian's idea, and they were all very curious. As for the fish fences here, it was not a problem for them but also convenient for them. When the river rose, they could even jump on them. You should go back. We'll patrol tonight. Lang Jie, you bring some people here early tomorrow. Mai said. Okay, we'll go back as soon as we finish the last one. I didn't notice it just now, but now I realize that I'm really hungry. Lang Jie touched his belly and looked at his work, very satisfied. Xiao Xian, who had finished his last fish fence, found that the people who came with Mai had brought not only their own stone tools and animal skin bags with food, but also a straw net. Uncle Mai, what are you going to do with the straw net? Xiao Xian asked. Well, Mai smiled, of course it's for food. Seeing that Xiao Xian was still confused, Mai said, You'll know when you come here tomorrow. By the way, remember to bring a big net bag when you come here tomorrow. Although Xiao Xian didn't know what they were going to put in the net bag, he still prepared a net bag for them. The next day, Xiao Xian brought Caesar and Cha-Cha to Old Ka's place early in the morning, and then went to the patrol area. When Xiao Xian arrived, Lang Jie and the other patrolmen were already there. What surprised Xiao Xian was that Mai and the other straw nets were filled with watermelon-sized snails. Not only that, but they could also see that near the riverbank, sharp horns that were gradually growing in size appeared on the surface of the river. Those were all conches, and they were all moving towards the riverbank. Although it didn't seem like a lot now, if they continued like this, everyone would be able to get a lot by the time the patrol ended. Just look at the microphones and they would know. Their shells were so thick that even the piranhas in the river couldn't do anything to them. However, the people in the tribe were different. After all, people could use tools to pull them out of their shells. Don't be fooled by their hard shells. If you take them back and cook them, the shells will break easily. In the past, some people wanted to use their shells to make things, but after a period of time they broke easily, Mai said to Xiaoxian. Even if these snails didn't provide much energy individually, the quantity was there, and they could indeed solve the food problem. No wonder Lang Jie wasn't worried. According to Mai, these snails usually didn't come out. They would only come ashore in large batches after the rainy season officially started. The good thing was that these snails didn't have any attack power. They were completely provided as rations for people who were short of food during the rainy season. They didn't know if there were any parasites, but judging from the people in the tribe who had been eating these snails for so many years, there shouldn't be any problem. Since the people who changed shifts had arrived, Mai and the others didn't stay for long. After a night of rain, they hurried back to eat something and sleep. After a good rest, they would come back to continue the patrol. You guys stay here first. If you find something abnormal that you can't deal with, blow the whistle immediately. Do you hear me? Mai said to Lang Jie and the others. Got it. It's not the first time we patrol in the rainy season. I've already told Xian. I'll take care of him. Don't worry. Lang Jie waved to Mai, and then immediately rushed over to check the fish fences made yesterday. The rain didn't stop. At most it would only rain a little. The river level had risen a lot compared to yesterday. Yesterday, more than half of the fish fences closest to the river were already submerged in the water. At this level, no fish would get in. It was still early, and they didn't find anything abnormal on the river. Xiaoxian picked up the snails with the others. Xiaoxian didn't know which species these snails belonged to. They had different shapes and colors, but Lang Jie said they could all be eaten. Xiaoxian didn't care too much. When they climbed ashore, he directly picked them up and threw them into the straw net. However, they stuck close to the ground, so it was not easy to pull them down from the stones on the slippery areas. They didn't encounter any problems for most of the day. Except for the various snails climbing to the riverbank, there was nothing else. When Xiaoxian went back that day, he sent a lot of snails to the kids in the orphan cave in Old Ku. After all, he couldn't eat so many snails by himself. Caesar didn't eat snails, but Cha-Cha enjoyed them for a while. She only tried to peck the snails out of the shells for fun. On the third day of Xiaoxian's patrol, the river level had completely surpassed the first fish fence. The first fish fence was not big, only 2 meters in diameter. At that time they thought it was too small, so they didn't tear it down and rebuild it. Instead, they made the second fish fence much bigger. Therefore, when the river level surpassed the first fish fence, the second fish fence, which was almost parallel to the first one, was only partly submerged in the water. What do you think? Lang Jie picked up the snails and threw them into the straw net, and shouted to Xiaoxian. Xiaoxian stood by the first fish fence and looked inside carefully. There were no fish. Other than that, there were no piranhas with big heads and mouths full of sharp teeth. There were no other fishes around, as if they had all disappeared. When the water level was rising, there was not even a single fish to be seen. So the fish fences were all for nothing? No, he could wait and see what else was in the river besides the fishes. Just keep them. Xiaoxian looked at the fish fences under his feet, and decided to leave them here for the time being. He would remove them when the water level went down. Anyway, they wouldn't interfere with the patrol. Nothing. Xiaoxian answered. When he got up and was about to go to the bank, Xiaoxian suddenly felt a chill sweep over him. Danger! Just when he was about to jump away from the fish fences and run to the bank, he heard Langga's hurried shout. Don't move! Don't move! To move or not to move? These two thoughts flashed through Xiaoxian's mind in an instant. In the end, Xiaoxian decided to follow Langga's words and stay there. Although he didn't move, the muscles all over his body were ready to move. Once something happened, he would move to the next step. His hand had already touched the stone knife. On the other side, Lang Jie didn't have time to pick up the snails anymore. He ran over with the others, and when he ran, he threw the snails in his hand into the water 30 meters away from Xiaoxian. Xiaoxian could hear the snails falling into the river, but the needle-like gaze was still there. Xiaoxian was frozen in place, maintaining his previous posture, not moving an inch. If he looked up, he would be able to see the source of the cold gaze. But at this moment Xiaoxian held back, and his eyes didn't wander. Not far away from Xiaoxian, A triangular head appeared on the surface of the water. There were 2 round eyes on the head. At this moment, a soft sound came from the water in front of him. It wasn't obvious in the rain, but Xiao Xian heard it clearly. Gua! Xiao Xian. Fuck! He finally knew why Lang Jie told him not to move. Chapter 92. On Langga's side, a few people were trying to attract attention. Xiao Xian felt the gaze in front of him stare at him for about 2 minutes before moving away. Xian, run! Lang Jie shouted from the side. There was no need for Lang Jie to shout. Xiao Xian had already sensed that the other party had moved away from him. His legs gathered strength in an instant, and his bent knees shot out. Crack! The stone pillar under his feet suddenly cracked, and Xiao Xian's body shot out like an arrow. The moment Xiao Xian left the stone pillar, he caught a glimpse of a long shadow shooting out and then retreating quickly from the corner of his eye. If Xiao Xian had been a little slower, he might have been swept by that long shadow. Xiao Xian knew what that long shadow was. If he was touched by it, he would be directly dragged into the water. At the same time, Lang Jie and the others had already thrown the spears in their hands at the creature in the water. They didn't dare to directly throw the spears earlier because Xiao Xian's position could easily injure him. Now that Xiao Xian had left, they didn't have to be restrained. The muscles on their arms bulged as they threw the spears in their hands. The stone spears pierced through the curtain of rain. Xiao Xian could still hear the whooshing sound of the spears as they flew through the air. Puff! 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 3 spears pierced the body of the creature in the water, and red blood flowed out. If the piranhas were here, they would have followed the smell and come over to snatch it. But now, other than the struggling of the creature that had been shot, there was nothing else. Whooshing! Another 2 spears were thrown. Long straw ropes were tied to the spears. Obviously, they were used to drag the prey that had just been shot to the shore. As the people on the shore retracted the straw ropes, Xiao Xian finally saw the figure of the creature. It was a little different from what he had imagined. The creature that had been dragged to the shore did indeed look like a frog, but what was more obvious was that it had a long tail behind it. A tadpole? A tadpole that had not yet developed into a frog but had grown both front and rear limbs? Xiao Xian didn't expect to see something like this when he heard the screams just now. The long-tailed frog that was shot was still struggling, but its struggle was a little weaker than before. Its forelimbs and back legs were kicking, leaving marks on the riverbank. After the long-tailed frog was stabbed a few more times and stopped struggling, Xiao Xian took a closer look. In addition to its long tail, its limbs were webbed instead of toes. Opening its mouth, there were some sharp teeth in its mouth. Other than that, it looked exactly like a fully transformed frog. Not only that, but the size of this long-tailed frog also made Xiao Xian speechless. Not counting its long tail, its body length was already more than 5 meters long. No wonder Lang Jie and the others were so nervous. It was Xiao Xian's first time seeing such a big frog with fangs and a long tail. I was almost scared to death just now. Seeing that Xiao Xian was safe and sound, Lang Jie let out a long sigh of relief. Then he warned Xiao Xian, "This thing came out. You have to be careful from now on. It's best not to go to the fish fence for the next few days." Whether or not they could catch fish was a small matter. Their safety was the most important thing. Lang Jie still had a lingering fear. He didn't expect the thing in the water to come out so soon. When he saw the 2 round eyes peeking out of the water very close to Xiao Xian, Lang Jie felt as if a basin of cold water had been splashed on his face. Some of the people who had been on patrol had been swept into the water. Those who had been pulled into the river never came back. Although everyone had taken precautions and hunted many of these things every year, they still fell into the trap if they were not careful. In front of the prey, they couldn't be careless. Watching the others slaughter the long-tailed frog, Lang Jie told Xiao Xian some things he needed to pay attention to. He also told Xiao Xian about some previous tragedies, in order to attract Xiao Xian's attention. As for this thing, it's not bad to eat. We can still hunt some now, but in 2 days it will be difficult to do so, Lang Jie said. On the same day, Xiao Xian hunted 3 long-tailed frogs with Lang Jie and the others. Except for the different patterns on the surface of the skin, these 3 frogs were all strange species with large fangs and long tails. The people on patrol shared some of the frogs and brought them back after the patrol. It was not bad to eat. Although it was not as tender as the frog meat that Xiaoxian had eaten in his previous life, it contained more energy than snail meat. The rainy season here was relatively short compared to winter, but it was not a matter of 1 or 2 days. It was about 30 days. No one could tell the exact time because it was different every year. 2 days later, because of the incessant rain, the river level rose a lot. Xiaoxian thought that at this rate, it would take less than 10 days to cross the stone line. But the others didn't seem worried at all. When Xiaoxian came to the riverbank to patrol, from the shallow water to the deeper areas, he could see a lot of slightly triangular heads and round eyes along the riverbank, densely packed. No wonder Lang Jie said that it was difficult to hunt. There were so many long-tailed frogs. Before you could pull the frogs ashore, the straw rope would be pulled into the river by them. Sometimes when he had nothing to do, Lang Jie would stuff mud into the shell of a snail and then throw it over, watching the long-tailed frogs shoot out their long tongues to snatch the food. Like the frogs that Xiaoxian knew, the long-tailed frogs also caught moving things. Many times, the snails thrown over were swept away by their long tongues before they fell into the water. Those long-tailed frogs never went ashore. At most, they would lie down in the shallow water, showing their triangular heads and a pair of round eyes. They also rarely croaked, unlike Xiaoxian's imagination. Occasionally, he would hear a small and short gua sound. As the river level rose, every day when Xiaoxian went over, the patrol would retreat. Because of the existence of the long-tailed frogs, they had to keep a safe distance from the river. Until one day, when Xiaoxian came to the riverbank, he found that the long-tailed frogs lying near the riverbank had all disappeared, and the river level, which had risen to the 7th fish fence, had begun to recede. The rainy season was not over. Lang Jie told Xiaoxian that this was only the first time the river level had receded in the rainy season, and there would be a few more times of receding. After the first receding, all the long-tailed frogs would disappear, and there would be no need to worry about them appearing again. At the same time, Xiaoxian also noticed that when the river level receded, the river flow, which had gradually become obvious because of the rising water during the rainy season, had changed. Now the river did not flow in the direction where the river overlords swam, but upstream as Xiaoxian guessed. The change in the river flow, and the disappearance of the long-tailed frogs overnight, all told Xiaoxian that something had happened upstream. According to Lang Jie, the river level would recede several times during the rainy season, and every time the river level receded, the river flow would change. Every year during the rainy season there were many things that they did not know about. Because of these strange phenomena, the people in the tribe felt that this boundless river was even more mysterious. They were not willing to explore it, and did not dare to explore it. When the river level receded for the first time, Xiaoxian saw the wood-eating insect in the 7th fish fence. The 7th fish fence was set up by Xiaoxian. He put a few pieces of wood in the fence, but he did not expect that the river level would recede, and the wood-eating insect would be trapped inside temporarily. The wood-eating insect was like a mass of thick mucus. When it smelled the existence of wood, it would stick to the wood or directly grow, and then pull the wood down. However, Xiaoxian found that there were many trees in the flooded areas, and those trees were not eaten much. If a small piece of wood was thrown into the river, it would be pulled down after more than an hour. Normally, it would not take more than 2 minutes for the floating wood to disappear. Obviously, the wood-eating insect's activities were also very abnormal during the rainy season. Therefore, Xiaoxian would put a piece of wood in the water every day when he was patrolling, to see how long it would take for it to be pulled down. A thin straw rope was tied to the wood, and the other end of the rope was tied to the stone pillar, so that it would not float away. After returning, Xiaoxian would record the results of the day in his secret notebook. This rainy season only lasted for 27 days, which was a few days shorter than last year. This was a normal phenomenon. According to the old warriors, the longest rainy season they had experienced was 40 days, but the shortest rainy season was no less than 25 days. When the rain stopped, the lingering dark clouds in the sky dispersed, and the long-awaited sun shone on the land once again. Everyone in the tribe felt as sunny as the weather. The children who had been cooped up in the house for nearly 30 days ran out happily, and ran around barefoot, laughing loudly. The children in the cave also began to prepare things. The rainy season was over, and they could continue to fish. For the time being, they did not have to worry about being dazed by the roars from the river. Why was it temporary? Because the river monsters that had stopped roaring would appear again after a while, and roar again. Xian, let's go back. Lang Jie and the others had already packed up and were ready to leave. I'll go back right away. You guys go first. Xiao Xian responded. After the rainy season, as long as they did not go into the water, they would not be in danger, so Lang Jie was not worried. After Lang Jie and the others left, Xiao Xian took out a wooden boat from the animal skin bag. This was a simple sailboat he made in the last few days of patrolling, with the wood and some small stone nails he stored in the house every day after returning home. The sail was only made of the leaves of a kind of plant, and the planks were also ordinary wood. The hull of the sailboat was only 2 palms long. The wind blew from the river bank to the river. Xiao Xian put the simple sailboat on the river, and with a little force from his fingers, the hull was pushed away. It swayed and was blown away by the wind, away from the shoal of the river bank, to the place where the boundary could not be seen. The green on the boat was particularly conspicuous. There were a lot of piranhas in the river. These big-headed, low-IQ guys that had disappeared for a rainy season began to be active again. Even more active than before the rainy season. Throwing a small piece of bloody meat into the river could cause them to fight for a long time, and they were very energetic. The good thing was that they were not interested in wood, and the wood-eating insects in the river that were interested in would seem to have disappeared. Standing by the river and watching for a while, Xiao Xian carried his things and left. When he went up the mountain, he looked back at the river, and could see the little dot below Yangguang gradually drifting away. Well, that's it for tonight. I'll continue tomorrow. Good night, everyone. Chapter 93. After the end of the rainy season, it was Ta's hunting team's turn to go hunting. This time, Xiao Xian followed Mai's hunting team to the mountaintop. When they gathered to sing the hunting song, Ta did not say anything when he saw Xiao Xian. He just looked a little unhappy, but he did not dare to show it. It seemed that the shaman had talked to him, so he did not dare to say anything. Even if he had any thoughts, he had to keep them to himself. If he showed it, it would be disrespectful to the shaman. Ta also held his breath. He thought that even without Xiao Xian they could still get more plants. Even if they needed to set traps, could no one in the advance group know how to do that? Did the ancestors only protect Xiao Xian, but not the elites in the tribe? He did not believe it. The other hunting team members also looked at Xiao Xian with curiosity, especially the young warriors. When they looked at Xiao Xian, they were obviously gloating. Their eyes seemed to say, "See, I told you. That guy will definitely be kicked out of the advance group." Lang Jie was worried that Xiao Xian would think too much, so he kept comforting him on the way up the mountain. However, he did not know that Xiao Xian did not care about it at all. He was the one who had suggested it. Caesar and Cha-Cha were left in Old Ka's place. There was still some food left and they all moved there. There was still some food in the ice cave on the mountaintop so they would not starve. The hunting time was a little tight this time. As soon as the rainy season was over, Ta quickly gathered the leaders of each hunting team to prepare for the hunting trip. They had to come back before the full moon, because during the full moon, the beasts in the forest would be extremely violent. Therefore, according to past experience, no matter which hunting team went out at this time, they must make sure to come back before the full moon. It would be best if they could come back a few days earlier. Last time, when Xiao Xian went hunting with Mai and the others, the hunting team stopped at the second foothold on the hunting route because of the discovery of the ancestors. But this time, the hunting in the first and second footholds went smoothly, and Xiao Xian followed them to the third foothold. There were many lakes in the hunting ground of the third foothold. After the rainy season, the water level of the larger lakes rose, and a few smaller lakes appeared in other places. After the rainy season, many wild beasts came out to play, including many ferocious beasts. With the previous hunting experience and the increase in strength, the harvest this time was very rich. Because of the large proportion of high-level prey, the prey brought back this time was enough to last more than 50 days. In the tribe, Old Ku was not as worried as before. After thinking about it, Old Ku concluded that Xiao Xian did not say "don't worry" before setting off. And that was the truth. This hunting went very smoothly, And Xiaoxian also let go of his responsibilities, assisting, killing, setting traps, and so on. He was no longer a walk-on. Xiaoxian was very satisfied with the fruitful hunting. The only difference from the previous hunting trips was that as the moon became rounder and rounder at night, the forest at night seemed to be covered with a layer of hazy silver light, and the view was not so dark. But at the same time, the wild beasts and ferocious beasts at night were obviously becoming more and more violent. No matter day or night, they could hear all kinds of wild beasts and ferocious beasts roaring more frequently than before. 20 days later, the hunting team returned to the tribe. In the last few days, because of the frequent attacks of the wild beasts, many people in each hunting group had been injured. Fortunately, they had been prepared for this. Although many people were injured, only 3 people were seriously injured. Compared to the current situation, 3 people were not that serious. Fortunately, no one in Mai's hunting team was seriously injured. When they returned to the tribe, Xiaoxian found that the level of the river at the foot of the mountain had decreased a lot. The fish fences were still there. The first fish fence was originally close to the river, and after the end of the rainy season, the rising river level fell back down. Compared with before the rainy season, the river level was only a little higher, and the river water was in contact with the first fish fence. But now more than 20 days had passed. When they came back, the river level had decreased a lot, even lower than before the rainy season. It's going to be a full moon soon, and the river level will decrease faster in the next few days, Lang Jie said. After thinking for a while, Lang Jie smiled and said, "The fish fences we set didn't catch anything during the rainy season, but after the full moon this time, maybe we will catch something." The strange thing about this world was that the 2 moons in the night sky were only full once a year. At that time, the 2 moons in the night sky would meet, overlap, and then separate again, moving in different directions. The night of the full moon was the time when the 2 moons overlapped. At this time last year, Xiaoxian, like the other children, spent most of his time in the cave. He didn't get close to the river, so naturally he didn't see the ebb and flow of the river. This year there were more people fishing, but when the river level decreased, they were still not allowed to touch the water. Those who were supposed to stay in the cave continued to stay in the cave. After collecting the game, Xiaoxian led Caesar and Cha-Cha back. They have been a little restless recently. You should pay attention to them, Olka said. Xiaoxian saw the pile of bones next to him. The long bones were bitten into small pieces, and Caesar didn't eat them, so he just threw them there. There were many scratches on the ground made by the wolf's claws. As for Cha-Cha, she was very active before. She wanted to peck at everything she saw. She even used her claws to scratch and Cha-Cha. But recently, she became very quiet and motionless. If she wasn't sleeping, she was just squatting in her nest and didn't go anywhere. After Xiaoxian returned to the wooden house, he looked at the energetic Caesar and the unusually quiet Cha-Cha. After thinking for a while, he took out his knife and decided to make something. During this hunting trip, the leaves of a tree reminded Xiaoxian of a small toy. Boomerang, also known as a boomerang, was something that Xiaoxian used to play with when he was a child. It could be made with paper, but in the tribe it was better to use wood. Xiaoxian made a V-shaped boomerang. After becoming proficient in making stone and wood, it wasn't difficult to make a boomerang like this. He was very familiar with it. In less than an hour, Xiaoxian walked out of the door with the finished product. "Caesar, come out." Xiaoxian called out the wolf that was wandering around the house. He patted the wolf's head with the boomerang in his hand and said, "I'll throw it out. You pick it up." When he trained Caesar in the past, Xiaoxian would sometimes throw out a branch or a bone for Caesar to pick up. So Caesar was familiar with this. Seeing Caesar's eyes on the boomerang in his hand, Xiaoxian knew that he was ready. He threw the boomerang in his hand. The boomerang that was thrown out quickly flew away. But soon it flew in an arc to the left. After a big circle, it flew back to Xiaoxian. Caesar, who had been chasing after the boomerang, was very puzzled. He didn't understand why the boomerang would come back by itself. When Xiaoxian threw it out again, he ran after it again. What? Tuo and Kiki, who came to find Xiaoxian, were very surprised to see a piece of wood thrown out by Xiaoxian. The piece of wood made a big circle in the air and came back to Xiaoxian. "What is this?" Tuo came over and asked curiously. They had gained a lot in this hunting trip. Compared to their previous hunting trips, The quantity was still considerable. But in terms of quality, it was not as good as the green thief and the wind ball. Even though some people in the team had set up traps outside at night, they still didn't gain anything. Some of the traps were even destroyed by unknown forces. He came to find Xiaoxian to ask if Xiaoxian wanted to join the advance group again. Unexpectedly, he saw such a novel thing as soon as he arrived. "This is a boomerang," Xiaoxian said. "Can I have a try?" Tua was itching to try. "Sure." Xiaoxian handed the boomerang to Tua and explained the technique. "Won't it really be thrown away?" Tua was still unsure. After all, he was used to throwing stone spears and other things. He always felt that this thing would fly far away once it was thrown out. As for flying back, no. Xiaoxian said affirmatively. "Okay, let me try first." Tua gave it a try. Seeing that it could really fly back, he was relieved and used more strength for the second time. Kiki, who was standing next to Tua, opened his eyes wide without blinking. He saw the piece of wood thrown out by Tua and then fly back again. He swallowed his saliva and rubbed his palms. "Let me do it." When Tua caught the flying boomerang, Kiki rushed to grab it. However, the result of his carelessness was that the wooden boomerang was broken before it could be thrown out. Chapter 94. Kiki was beaten up by Tua and dragged away. Before they left, Tua and Kiki asked Xiaoxian to make 2 boomerangs for them without hesitation. Boomerangs were said to be invented by some aborigines. But here, boomerangs were not very helpful for hunting. Thinking of the ferocious beasts in the forest, they knew that boomerangs could not harm them at all. However, they could also be used to drive away birds and beasts, or as bait to attract the attention of ferocious beasts. Before Tua left, he asked Xiaoxian whether he would join the advance group again. Xiaoxian did not give a clear answer. He only said that he would think about it when he was more powerful. Tua and Kiki's coming here might not have been ordered by Ta, but Ta must have known about it, and he did not stop them. No matter what Ta thought, Xiaoxian did not plan to join the advance group again. He felt more comfortable in Mai's hunting group. Because of Xiaoxian's previous achievements, the shaman would give him the herbs he needed. Xiaoxian gave those herbs to old Ku, who now looked much more energetic than before. When he came to himself, he saw that Caesar was still squatting on the ground, looking at the broken boomerang. Xiaoxian walked over and picked up the broken boomerang. He threw it into the house and made a fire later. He patted Caesar's head to comfort him and said, "I'll make you a new one tomorrow." Probably because of the exercise during the day, Caesar's vigorous energy had decreased a lot. At night, Caesar was a little quieter. Xiaoxian stood at the door, looking at the night sky. The 2 moons which were almost full had met. According to the old warriors, the river level would drop faster when the 2 moons met. The change was obvious. The next day when Xiaoxian came to the river, he saw that the river level had dropped a lot compared to yesterday. The river was also rushing downstream, as if something was sucking it downstream. This indeed confirmed the old warriors' words. They said that when the moon was full, the river would disappear. After the river level dropped, a lot of sand was exposed. Things could be seen moving in the sand. Sometimes an unknown bird would fly to the sand to peck, but sometimes a big mouth would jump out from the sand and bite the bird into the sand. Even if there was only sand left, it was still dangerous. No wonder the tribe didn't allow people to get close to that area. Not to mention the fact that the sand could easily sink in. Just the creatures hiding in the sand were enough to scare everyone. In the next few days, the 2 moons overlapped more and more, and the river flowed faster and faster. Now, standing next to the first fish fence, there was nothing but sand in front of their eyes. However, because the river level was falling, they could see the bottom of the river. In addition to the sand, there were also some strange-looking aquatic plants. Some were like corals and some were like ordinary aquatic plants, but they could move on their own. Less than 10 meters from the first fish fence, there was a steep slope. More than 100 meters away, the river was very deep. It even made people feel like they were in a bottomless abyss. A river that allowed the river overlords to live freely must not be an ordinary river. It was just that they didn't know how deep the river was. Before the river disappeared, Xiaoxian would throw a piece of wood into the river and watch the wood flow downstream. Until it was out of their sight, none of the wood would sink. Obviously, some creatures that ate wood were still not in the river. As the time of the 2 moons was getting closer and closer, not only Caesar and Cha-Cha's symptoms were getting more and more obvious, but the night swallow creatures were also getting more and more rampant. Other people couldn't hear the night swallow's sound, but Xiao Xian could. He could hear the night swallow creatures' excitement from their sounds. This bloodthirsty excitement made them overcome their fear of fire. Even if someone walked around at night with a torch, they would be attacked by the night swallow creatures. Many night swallow creatures were burned to death by the fire. However, the night swallow creatures only had eyes for their targets. Caesar would howl like the wolves in the forest these days. Last year, Caesar's symptoms were not as obvious as now, probably because he was still young, so he didn't howl. However, this year was different. At first, the patrolling warriors thought that wolves had entered the tribe, but when they came, they found out that it was Caesar. After all, Caesar didn't howl like that in the tribe before. Cha-Cha now nestled in its nest every day and didn't go anywhere, as if it felt that there was danger outside. If it wasn't for its increasing appetite, Xiao Xian would have thought that it was sick. As for the river at the foot of the mountain, the most intuitive feeling was that the river had gone far away, as if there had never been a river at the foot of the mountain. It had really disappeared, leaving behind only an abyss filled with mud and sand. Looking up, looking into the distance, there was nothing. There was no river, no other shore, and it was impossible to see where the border was. If it wasn't for the old warrior's warning, Xiao Xian would also have a psychological fear of the unknown because of such a strange phenomenon. On the day when the 2 moons completely overlapped, the night was as bright as day. After the 2 moons overlapped, it was as if the 2 moons had merged into one, becoming much bigger. The full moon in the night sky was like a huge pale eyeball overlooking everything on the ground. That night, Night Swallow danced wildly above the abyss where the river had disappeared, but it didn't fly back into the tribe. On the top of the mountain, the shaman stood beside the fire pit, chanting something. In the fire pit, there was originally a small flame, but now it had filled the entire fire pit. The high flame made the top of the mountain look like a torch, which also reduced the people's fear of such a phenomenon. The tribe was terrifyingly quiet. Except for the shaman on the top of the mountain, no one was standing outside. Xiao Xian had already been told to stay in the house for the night. Caesar was howling in the house, and Cha-Cha was curled up in its nest, wishing that it could bury its head in its wings. Even in the house, they could hear the vague roars of beasts from far away in the forest. It wasn't until the next day when the moon disappeared and the sun appeared that everyone came out again. Everyone's face showed a sense of relief. Although the full moon night didn't cause any substantial harm to them, there was an indescribable sense of fear. Only when they saw the flame on the top of the mountain through the crack of the window did they feel relieved. Now, after the full moon night, everyone seemed to be alive again. On the second night when the 2 moons overlapped, although the moon still looked like one, it was not as big as last night. If you looked carefully, you could see some changes. The 2 moons were separating. When night fell, Xiao Xian felt that the ground under his feet was shaking, and the shaking was getting stronger and stronger. He had already learned more from old Ku, so he wasn't worried. He remembered that at this time last year in the cave, he thought there would be an earthquake. When he ran out of the cave, he was thrown back into the cave and laughed at by the other children. In the second half of the night, Xiao Xian was awakened by the shaking of the ground again. At the same time, there was a rumbling sound like thousands of horses galloping. Just by listening to the sound, one could feel the momentum. The humidity in the air was increasing, and there was more and more water vapor. The wind was blowing fiercely outside the house. The gravel was lifted up and hit the wooden wall with a crackling sound. Xiao Xian even suspected that the wall of the wooden house would be penetrated by the gravel. The rumbling sound was getting louder and louder. The rumbling sound was accompanied by the violent shaking of the ground under his feet, and the humid water vapor in the air. Obviously, just as the old warrior said, the falling river that disappeared was rising again. A moment later, woo! The ear-piercing shriek was extremely clear amidst the rumbling of the surroundings. After the shriek that sounded like a steam whistle, it was followed by the familiar muffled sound of thunder that covered the previous rumbling. It was like the declaration of a king, and all noise was under his command. And this was also like a signal to return. The creatures that disappeared during the rainy season all came back with the river. The rumbling sound gradually faded away, but the voices of the kings of the river were heard all night. It was believed that this night, many people in the tribe couldn't sleep, just like Xiaoxian. You're tuning into the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.